I sure love living my life unbothered by optical media. I can't think of anything that— Whoa! Prince of Persia on the PSP! The year is 2006. The Xbox 360 has been the hot new thing for about a year at this point. People are ditching their original Xboxes in droves in favor of the 360.
If I had a baby, I'd trade my baby in for this thing.
Little did they know they would also be ditching their 360s in droves in just a couple years as well, but you know.
Son of a bitch! What the— Oh my god!
And luckily all this mass upgrading had made it make sense for my family to finally pick up an original Xbox at an affordable price. 6-year-old me couldn't care less about the fact that it was technically last gen. Within my little world, which had been dominated by nothing but a SNES up to that point, the Xbox was advanced alien future technology as far as I was concerned. And who could even blame me for thinking that? Have you seen the boot animation on this thing? Nightmares about the green blob getting me aside, just navigating through these cryptic-looking menus and hearing this mysterious background ambience was so incredibly captivating to me. Up until now, it had never even occurred to me that a game console could have a menu, let alone have one that I could just be content sitting down and exploring. And the big menacing stature of the console itself really tied everything together. Both the hardware and the software seemed like they were built specifically to appeal to every gamer's, as dumb as it sounds, darker bad guy side. And to me, the Xbox represented an outstretched arm beckoning me to leave the warm and fuzzy cocoon of Nintendo games. It was time to put down the SNES pad, pick up a Duke, and see what Microsoft's new world had to offer. Fast forward to now, and the original Xbox is still remembered as one of the greats, although it is an aging one. This thing's pretty much a 22-year-old Pentium 3 PC at heart, and they're all kind of starting to have 22-year-old Pentium 3 PC issues now. Most notable being this clock capacitor leakage, which can spill this yummy capacitor fluid all over the motherboard and turn your Xbox into an Xbox. And if the clock capacitor blowing up doesn't get it, that spinning rust of a mechanical IDE hard drive probably will. And you know those controllers that you've been wrapping up the wrong way for 22 years? Yeah, well, that leads to the wires inside cracking and breaking apart, and next thing you know, you're either soldering together a cable to fix it, or you're playing Twister to get the connection stable every time you want to use it.
Hey!
How about that belt in the DVD drive drying out and falling off? That's kind of an important component to break, considering not only do you have to open up the Xbox to fix it, but then you'd also have to go and open up the DVD drive too. That sucks. I think the Xbox may have accidentally gotten CC'd in the email about how DVD drives are now considered vestigial organs in the modern era. It kind of just decided, well, I guess I don't need this anymore. And next thing you know, you're reliving your 6-year-old life of doing nothing but navigating through the menus, except this time it's not nearly as entertaining. But what if I told you there's a better way? There's a greener pasture than the one you're about to put your dying Xbox down into. A magical world where you needn't worry about ancient hard drives or rely on these outdated media formats. It's the world of Homebrew, and the Xbox has a vast one. Although I do want to say that you do still need to yank the clock capacitor regardless, because Homebrew cannot fix that. And if you haven't taken that thing out already, it's probably already blown up in your Xbox, causing all kind of havoc in there as we speak. So if you haven't done that yet and you want to learn more about what you can do to get rid of it, I'm going to link this video in the description where they show you how to remove it and then clean the motherboard up. It's not that hard if you have the right stuff. But you do have to do this. It will destroy your Xbox.
You don't want to be like this. This is disgusting.
And you know, while you've got this whole guy open to take care of that, let me show you something. This is the SATA to IDE adapter, and it's the key to replacing this old 8GB hard drive that's in there. An 8GB hard drive. That is insane to think about. Anyway, there are some hoops you have to jump through to get a new drive installed, since by default the Xbox is very particular about locking and unlocking the drive that it boots from, and it can be very temperamental about it. There's a lot of guides out there at this point that go over the whole upgrade process, and there's a few different routes that you can go down. They're pretty much sorted based on how likely you are to burn down your house if you have to pick up a soldering iron. In mine, I've got this 320GB 3.5-inch IDE hard drive that I installed probably like 10 years ago at this point. When I upgraded mine, mine, I opted to do the extremely convoluted Xbox HDM method, which requires a decrepit computer and some sketchy hot swapping shenanigans between the Xbox and the computer. It was horrible, but it didn't require any soldering. And at the time, I absolutely was someone who would burn their house down if they had to pick up a soldering iron. So this was great. That was the most accessible method that I had to get it done 10 years ago. And I haven't had to upgrade my hard drive since, luckily. From what I can gather about it nowadays, you're probably best off doing something called a TSOP flash. It'll rewrite the BIOS in a way that lets you just kind of plop in a new hard drive and be on your way for the most part. There is some other stuff you have to do to get the OS back installed, but it's not that bad. And when it comes to soldering, you only have to bridge one connection on the motherboard, which is nice. However, if you're still looking at your soldering iron and thinking, wait, how much does my renter's insurance cover again? There's also this middle of the road option, which doesn't require any soldering. There's a tool called Chimp. It does still require a Molex power cable splitter and more hot swapping, but no computers needed, just a soft-modded Xbox. And I do want to note that by far the best option if you want to upgrade the hard drive is the TSOP flash. If you're truly that scared of soldering, then either A, use this as a character building exercise and do it anyway, or B, some people have had success using something called conductive glue to bridge those solder points. I have never used this, but I do see it recommended sometimes. There's also all kinds of dedicated mod chips out there that do all kinds of crazy stuff, including the functionality that a TSOP flash would effectively give you. But I really have no experience in that field at all. I've never messed with them, so instead of regurgitating some stuff of dubious accuracy that I read on some forum to you guys, I'm gonna leave the coverage of those to the people that actually know what they're talking about. Okay, so you've got your Xbox open, you've got your clock capacitor removed, you've got your shiny new hard drive installed, but what about that pesky broken DVD drive? Here's a super easy way to deal with it. Don't worry, I didn't actually throw it in the garbage, it's just a joke, don't get mad at me in the comments, I swear to God. When you have a modded Xbox, you can finally let go of that horrible, flawed media format. Say it with me, everybody. Optical media bad. But wait, there's a plot hole in this story. If the DVD drive is broken, then how did this Xbox get soft modded in the first place? Because you need an exploitable game like Splinter Cell, and you can only boot that game from the DVD drive. But it doesn't have to be this particular DVD drive. If you have a mod chip, for the most part, you can toss in any old IDE optical drive and burn a copy of Splinter Cell with your PC and then boot it that way, which is another pretty cool use case for mod chips. But the main character of this story can't solder in a mod chip. Not anymore. So what can he do? Well, his best bet is probably to try to repair the one that he's already got. If he's lucky, it's just the belt in here that needs replacing. If he's unlucky and it's the laser or one of the motors or the controller board, he might just be better off buying a used drive on eBay and hoping that works well enough for one last use. After all you need to do is boot one stupid game, and then the drive can go in the garbage. Because with his newly modded Xbox, he's gonna be playing games off his hard drive, baby. That's the reason I upgraded my hard drive and even soft modded my Xbox to begin with. Even a small 320 gigabyte drive like this one will hold around 60 or so Xbox games, which is way more than enough for me. But I didn't fill my hard drive with Xbox games. I couldn't even think of 60 games I would want to play on the original Xbox anyway. Honestly, all I really need is Madagascar up to the point here where you can play the mini golf game, then I'm pretty much set, that's all I need. But either way, once you mod your Xbox, you can play a hell of a lot more than just Xbox games. NES? We got those. Super Nintendo? We got those too. With the original Xbox, it becomes more of a question of what can't you emulate? The Xbox has been a titan of game emulation for a really long time now. It's pretty common to see them used in both home and real arcade setups. Thanks to the nearly off-the-shelf Pentium 3 CPU that's in the Xbox, Homebrew developers had a fantastic starting point to port over most existing emulators that were already running on PC. From what I've gathered listening to videos from the likes of MVG, some of the hardest parts of doing this were implementing virtual RAM management trickery to get around having 64 megabytes of RAM to work with. I'm sure it also helped to have illegal SDK access, but, you know, I'm sure none of the good folks over in the Xbox Homebrew community would leverage that to their advantage, right? All the Homebrew on the Xbox is clean room, right? Right, guys? Uh-oh. Okay, real quick, 2 questions for you. Do you know what historical revisionism is? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to be willing to collude on something with me? Fantastic. Anyway, yes, all of the emulators and Homebrew on the original Xbox are developed by devs who use only legally obtained code and tools.
No, they don't.
In reality, it doesn't really matter. Anything that gives the Homebrew scene higher quality software gets a pass by me, believe me. I wouldn't even be surprised if Microsoft couldn't care at this point. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Emulation on the Xbox is great. Surreal 64 is one of the best examples of this. Not everything is going to work right off the bat, but you've got a few different cores to choose from based on the game that you're playing to widen the compatibility of it. It combines a handful of different emulators all into one. And a console even being able to emulate its competitors' previous gen hardware, it's just such a huge flex, and I love it when this happens. This is even how I played Super Smash Bros. 64 for the longest time, believe it or not. I also had a modded Wii at this point that I could have run it on, but I hadn't quite drank the GameCube controller Kool-Aid yet at that time. I preferred this monstrosity instead. And as great as N64 can be on here, I do still prefer the Wii. The Wii seems like it has just an ever so slight edge over the Xbox. But hey, it's not done yet. Not only can the Xbox emulate N64, it pulls the same trick off on Sony too. The performance for PS1 is pretty hit or miss though, to be honest. I mean, because you can see right here, Resident Evil runs perfect, unless you pull out your gun, which for some reason then the FPS goes to like 7, and then you put it away and it's back to 30? I don't know. And then Crash Bandicoot here runs, I guess, I don't know. And Gran Turismo, I mean, can you even say it runs if we're measuring it in seconds per frame here? Still though, the fact that it's doable at all is pretty sick. It's not the best way to play PS1 games, but for a select few titles that do run really well, this is a pretty dang good way to experience them. It's just gonna be way too hard for me to go over all the best parts of emulation on this thing because, well, there's just too much to cover. Any system that you can think of under the sun that was made before the Xbox probably has an emulator on it. And you're not even limited to traditional home consoles either. You wanna emulate the Wonder Swan? Sure, why not? It doesn't even have to be a game console. You want to experience the Macintosh Plus to finally immerse yourself in... Well, with the Xbox, reality can be stranger than fiction, just for you. The arcade machine emulation scene is also pretty huge here. Again, think of any system made before the Xbox and it's pretty much here. When it comes to older emulation, I'd almost argue that the Xbox is the best console out there to mod to do it. It's really close between the Xbox and Wii for me. Emulation aside, another gigantic draw to the Xbox at the time was its media center potential. Ever heard of Kodi? It's a pretty popular media center front end, I'd say. Well, Kodi started life out on the Xbox as XBMC. It hasn't been updated since 2016 on the original Xbox, but it's still the most modern looking thing on the Xbox today, I would argue. They can even still stream content from my Plex server too, which is kind of crazy. I mean, not very well. 64 megabytes of RAM doesn't get you very far these days. But for the lower bitrate stuff, it actually does work. Obviously, you're not going to be seriously consuming your entire 4K content library on this thing, but back in the day, it was the killer app for modded Xboxes. I mean, think back to 2002. The practice of ripping DVDs to store movies digitally was just getting started. Netflix was a small movie rental company that only served up DVDs, and watching a decent quality video, let alone a movie, over the internet required a whole day of premeditated downloading, depending on your internet connection. So playing back your digital library was going to have to be done locally on the machine that's connected to your TV. You're not going to be streaming that. And if you didn't have an Xbox to do it all on, playing your ripped DVD files on your TV would require hooking up your PC to it, which is not nearly as simple to do as it is today with HDMI. Then you have to clunkily navigate around in Windows to play, pause, enable subtitles and stuff with your movie. And if your PC just wasn't near your TV, well, tough shit, you're not watching your movie without burning it back to a DVD and then sticking it in your DVD player. Which entirely defeats the purpose of trying to play back your digital copies without optical media. So you can probably understand why people chose not to live in that hellscape, and instead, they just modded their Xbox, installed a bigger hard drive, ripped all their DVDs to it, and enjoyed their awesome all-in-one media center solution. But say you're just not into watching movies on your Xbox. For those committed to not living a life of leisure, there's also Linux on the Xbox, because why wouldn't there be? It's not very usable. I couldn't really tell you one thing you could do with this, but if it wasn't here, it wouldn't really feel right. You know what I mean? Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the hard drive utility chimp that I was talking about earlier, that also relies on Xbox Linux. So let's see, we've gone over the hardware, emulation, Homebrew Media Center apps, and what would a homebrewed console be without ports? There's a handful of pretty cool games that were ported over to the Xbox, and we'll get this one out of the way. Yes, it runs Doom, very good. Yes, Doom, okay, moving on. Something way cooler in my opinion is Half-Life. And it's working, actually, don't get distracted by the missing textures on the NPCs and weapons. This runs really good. And it's not my install here that's messed up. This is just a known limitation with the port. The dev just barely couldn't get everything working here with only 64 megabytes of RAM, and textures on the NPCs and weapons had to get sacrificed to get it to run. There is a build for Xboxes with upgraded RAM, which does work better, but I've heard that it's also slightly unfinished. Anyway, other than these guys repping Tyler McVicker's merch store, this port runs pretty good. It's locked to 60 FPS the entire time. It plays like it was just made for this thing. And after all, the Xbox did have an official release for Counter-Strike, which from what I can see also runs pretty well, so I'm not all that surprised. Man, it runs a lot better than Half-Life 2 does on the Xbox, that's for sure. And another game that I'm really enjoying checking out every time I make one of these homebrew videos is Super Mario 64. Not under emulation, but running natively. Super Mario 64 has been reverse engineered for a few years now, and it can be natively ported to just about anything. It's like the next generation version of Can It Run Doom at this point. And the Xbox here runs Mario 64 pretty dang good. I was able to get it running in 720p as well, which is great. It does cause a bit of a slowdown in some areas, but overall it was fine. And I had checked out the Wii port of Mario 64 previously, and this is how that went. And I've been told that the Wii port has had some work done since I last looked at it though, so a lot of these issues have been fixed. Like the Wii version though, I did have to also compile this version myself, but the dev for the Xbox version, just like the Wii, also has a Docker that takes care of pretty much everything for you. All you gotta do is provide a ROM for the assets, and you'll be playing your favorite plumber on the Xbox. The Xbox really just is one of the greatest consoles for modding of all time, I think. It's super cool how devs are able to utilize this outdated PC hardware. I mean, 64 megabytes of RAM, like, come on, dude, that's insane. Anyway, sorry if this video is a little bit shorter than you might have expected. I usually like to look at original community-made games when I make these homebrew videos, but for the Xbox, I couldn't really find any that was worth sharing. Plus, it's been pretty busy with all these sticker packs that you guys have been buying. Thanks again for that. Oh, that reminds me. I just launched a spring store that you can find in the description. There's all kinds of stuff in there, from Bringus hoodies to grandma on the PSP and to whatever this is. It'd mean a lot to me if you checked it out. Plus, LTX is coming soon and I gotta get ready. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video nonetheless. Thanks to all my patrons for the support. Join the Discord and keep on trucking, gamer. The Sega Dreamcast, also known as the original Xbox, we have at home. Or maybe the best, worst console of all time. Can you tell I don't think very highly of the Dreamcast? I didn't have a Dreamcast growing up. And statistically, you probably didn't either. I was growing up during the twilight of the Xbox, PS2, GameCube generation of video game consoles, and the whole time I had never even heard of the Dreamcast. Most of the kids that I knew had a GameCube or a PS2, and if you had a cool uncle, you had an Xbox. Later on, as I got more interested in video games, I would browse around on Wikipedia to learn more about the game consoles of the past, and eventually I landed on the Dreamcast. Finding this thing for the first time was like a fever dream. Like, wait a second, you're telling me that Sonic Adventure 2 wasn't just a GameCube game? Sega kept making game consoles after the Genesis? And who could even blame me for not knowing? The Dreamcast had completely come and gone in the time span that it took me to learn to stop shitting in a diaper. Yet Sega over here was just celebrating 20 years of Dreamcast. 20 years? It wasn't even on sale for 2! So that's where I come from. The Dreamcast has always just kind of been a footnote to me. Just a little side quest that you could go on when you want to get into retro gaming. I always figured that if I chose not to bother with the Dreamcast, I wouldn't be missing much. But at the same time, the way I enjoy things is a little different. I'm all about the hacking, modding, and homebrew stuff. And let me tell ya, I'm in pretty deep. And luckily for me, whether a console succeeded or failed commercially doesn't generally factor into what you can do with it homebrew-wise. On this channel, I've shown you guys what you can do with a lot of my favorite consoles. But the Dreamcast, it's uncharted territory for me. Does homebrew on this thing suck as much as the sales figures for it did? Maybe, but there's only one way to find out. So the Dreamcast, it loads its games exclusively through an optical drive, optical media bad, which in this case is a GD-ROM drive made by Yamaha. A GD-ROM drive is different from a CD-ROM drive because it uses GD media, which holds 1.2 gigabytes of data, compared to CDs, which only hold 700 megabytes of data. So like, way to go Sega, right? GD-ROMs were a 71% improvement over CDs. That's just amazing. Why didn't everybody else start using these? Oh yeah. Yeah, the PS2 and Xbox, and to some extent the GameCube, all avoided CD storage limitations by just using DVDs. With the way that games were getting bigger at the time, with higher quality graphics and textures, 1.2 gigabytes was not gonna cut it this generation. Hey, no sweat for Yamaha though. GD-ROM sucks? No big deal. We still got our drum kit, motorcycle, piano, guitar, jet ski, robotics, snowmobile, boat, semiconductor manufacturing equipment, and crop dusting RC helicopter. businesses to keep us afloat. Funny enough, the best part about the drive that they threw in here has nothing to do with the GD-ROM format at all. No, this drive has the ability to read regular CDs for compatibility with mil-CD discs. What's mil-CD? Honestly, nobody really cares. All you really need to know is that it massively backfired, because it's why the Dreamcast can read games burned to CDs right out of the box. Well, most of them at least. If your Dreamcast has a 0 or a 1 right here, odds are that the very cool and very real games that are burned to CDs that you have will play just fine. And when it comes to burned games on CDs, the fact that CDs store less data than real Dreamcast discs does actually create some problems for some Dreamcast games. But for the most part, things still work fine and you don't even really notice. But enough about optical media. I don't even like optical media. How about the CPU? This guy is a 200 megahertz MIPS CPU made by Hitachi. And we all know what else Hitachi makes. Excavators. But what are we gonna be running on that beautiful 200 megahertz chip? Well, anything we want. But how? Normally, to try some Dreamcast homebrew out yourself, you'd have to burn a new CD for every application. Not only that, but even if you just wanted to add some ROMs to an emulator or something, bam, new CD. That sucks. Unlike consoles like the Wii, which have an SD card slot on the front and USB ports on the back, there's no real standard format of storage on the Dreamcast other than the optical drive. There is a cheap SD card adapter for the serial port, but I've heard it's very slow and the compatibility is hit and miss. All of this makes exploring the world of homebrew not only kind of a pain here, but just wasteful too. Not everybody has the skills to make CD art out of their old burns, so usually they're going right in the trash. If you just want to check out a few things, then I guess a 10-pack of CDs and a USB writer will do you just fine. But if you want to get into it, I'd recommend a GD-EMU. I installed one in this Dreamcast, and if you want to see me flail around trying to figure that one out, I made a video about it a while ago that you can find on the channel. The GD-EMU pretends to be a GD-ROM drive, but it reads everything from an SD card. It even lets you use this nice front end right here to load everything from. There's also some other wacky ways to install storage in this thing, like you can adapt a compact flash card or even a freaking IDE hard drive into it, and those methods are actually pretty cool because then you don't have to gut your optical drive. But for most people though, I still think that the GD-EMU is the best way to go since it's pretty much plug and play once you get the thing open. There's no soldering. You just have to be willing to sacrifice your optical drive, and I know I am. Let's put that GD-EMU to use and check out some ports, huh? The Dreamcast actually has a lot of games unofficially ported to it, including one of my favorites, Dota 2. Super Mario 64. While N64 emulation on the Dreamcast isn't much to write home about, and I'll talk more on that later, Super Mario 64 itself also is not great. Super Mario 64 on the Dreamcast is a port of the decompiled source code. Mario's extra-large mustache returns from the awful Wii port that I covered last year. Love to see that consistency. Text boxes actually work properly on this one, unlike the Wii, although I do kind of miss the SpaghettiOs, I'm not gonna lie. The game usually runs at about 50% speed, which is obviously less than ideal. You can find moments of full-speed gameplay scattered around, but it doesn't really happen often. But this is just one build. Many people have attempted to get it running on the Dreamcast, some with more success than others. For example, this other build has proper widescreen support, and for some reason it runs faster than it's supposed to, and the draw order is all screwed up. I don't know, it's kind of a mess. I'm glad that Mario 64 is working at all on the Dreamcast, since at this point in my life, I want to see this game run on absolutely everything before I eat shit and die. But as far as actually playing the game on here, don't waste your time. Another game I always love to check out in these kinds of videos is Half-Life, and on the Dreamcast, it's a bit of an oddity. This version is not a community-made homebrew port. In fact, it's as close to the real deal as you can get. Despite Half-Life never being released on the Dreamcast, it was fully ported by Captivation Digital Laboratories. Gearbox Software also made additional brand new content for it called Half-Life Blue Shift. Blue Shift was originally created for the Dreamcast specifically. A second disc was even planned for release after the first, which would have contained extra goodies like Opposing Forces multiplayer, Team Fortress Classic, and Counter-Strike. That would have been sick! The intention was obviously to release the game officially on the Dreamcast, but all of this unfortunately fell through after Sierra, the publisher for the game, canned the whole thing after the project was delayed several times. Eventually, a build of the game was leaked in 2003. It has a build date of May 23rd, 2001, about a month before the whole thing was canceled. So this leaked build serves well enough as an example of what the finished game would have been like, and it's what you're seeing me play here today. The Dreamcast and PC versions of Half-Life are actually fairly different from each other. If you want to learn more about that, I'd recommend watching Ratlobber's video covering Half-Life's ports. I don't really want to get into the weeds of that in this video. What I will get into though is how the game plays on the Dreamcast, which is poopy and bad. Look at this thing. How do you play a first-person shooter on it? Who f***ing knows? They opted to make the face buttons move you around, and the joystick moves the camera. As disgusting as this may seem in an era with modern shooters, it's probably still the best way to set the controls up. But it leaves you with just 6 buttons for everything else. Half-Life is not a 6-button game. To solve this, they made the left trigger a mode shift key that switches the functions of what all the buttons do. There are some other control schemes outside of the default one, and you are granted the freedom to set this atrocity up in any way that you can think of. But you know what? You could just choose not to use a controller at all. There's full Dreamcast keyboard and mouse support here. Also, yeah, those exist. I don't have the luxury of owning either of those though, so I suffer. But, I mean, it's only $70. Okay, so maybe I do own a Dreamcast keyboard, but that's all you're getting out of me. I'm not spending $100 on the mouse. But I do have to say, Half-Life on the Dreamcast with a keyboard is kind of great. Even without the mouse, it's so much better. I played the game with my right index finger on the joystick and my thumb on the D-pad. It's not super optimal, but with aim assist, it's not that bad. I highly recommend the keyboard and mouse if you want to play FPS games. A solid number of them on the Dreamcast have full support for the peripherals. Just be prepared to spend good money for a ball mouse in 2024. As for how Half-Life runs, it's fine for the most part. It's not great, it's not terrible. It's exactly what you would expect from Half-Life running on a Dreamcast. The frame rate dips hard in some areas, and I experienced a good amount of stuttering while fighting the Black Ops assassins. There's no autosave at all, which sucks really bad. There isn't even quick save. This is all made even worse because saving the game requires you to go way out of the action. And it wouldn't be so bad if the game didn't take its sweet time to write saves to the VMU. So it kinda just sucks all around. Overall, I would say that Half-Life on the Dreamcast is probably the worst way to play Half-Life. But it's not unplayable. If I was a kid again and this is the only way I could play Half-Life, I could make do with it. And despite the way it might play, the mystique and the story behind its creation and subsequent leaking to the public is really cool. I'm glad we can play it here today. It would have been a shame if it was just lost forever. And like the PC version of Half-Life, the Dreamcast port also enjoyed a good amount of mods. The one I want to try the most is Counter-Strike, which presents itself with 2 other games in this web browser looking window or something. This is a custom pack made by some dude, so that's why it looks like this. It even has the signature weird music in the background. As is the custom for bootleg game packs. Once you get in game, you enter this custom hub world of some kind where you can enter into these rooms in order to load different maps. Once you load into the map, you're given a mission to carry out. Then you have to go and kill all of the NPCs that are in your way. This is not like any Counter-Strike that I've ever played, but it's something, I guess. There's a whole lot more mods to try, but I think for now that's gonna wrap up our Half-Life adventure. There is one more port that I want to look at though. So I never played the original Postal. I've only ever played Postal 2. So my first time experiencing the game at all is right here, right now, on the Dreamcast. It feels less unique and a lot less comedic than the second game. As for the quality of the port, it runs extremely well, which makes sense because this was sold as an unlicensed retail release way after the Dreamcast was discontinued. We'll talk more about those kind of games later because there's a lot of them. But Postal here is a great port, and I'm sure a lot of people are happy to see it. Aside from game ports, what else is out there for Dreamcast Homebrew that's not an emulator? Like the Xbox, for example, had XBMC, but the Dreamcast? It's not really as useful for something like a media center in the way that the Xbox is, but there are still a few cool things to do. Like nearly every other game console these days, the Dreamcast has its own homebrew port of Linux. I snagged a version of Red Hat to try, and it booted up just fine. I typed my login with my fancy new keyboard, and then I remembered that I didn't buy a mouse. Yeah, not much I can do from here. But there is a copy of Doom built into it, and oh no, that's terrible, never mind. Along the same lines as Linux was an operating system called NetBSD. I got the kernel booted up, but doing anything beyond that seemed like a challenge that I'm not really up for, considering you need to get the Dreamcast hooked up to your local network, and then run some NFS shares for the Dreamcast to pull stuff off of, and no, not today. Remember how the Dreamcast has this little guy in the controllers, the VMU? Well, there's even Homebrew for these things too. There's a utility called VMU Tool that lets you do all kinds of exciting stuff to your VMU, like defragment its disk. How exciting. You can dump your save files, change the image that's displayed on the VMU screen. You can even hex edit the storage on it directly. It's a really powerful tool. You can transfer minigames to the VMU without owning a copy of the game that minigame came with, which is cool. There's even a couple of Homebrew games to play. There was a tiny version of Pokemon being worked on for the VMU, but sadly it looks like the project was abandoned. Alright, I know what you guys have been waiting for. What is a Homebrew video without emulation? But before I talk about the capability of the Dreamcast as an emulation device, I want to tell you about an interesting footnote in Dreamcast history regarding a semi-official Genesis emulator. So back in the day, there was a game cracking group for the Dreamcast called Echelon. They would post ripped copies of tons of Dreamcast games illegally. There was also a game called the Sega Smash Pack. It was an official collection of older Genesis games that ran on an emulator created by Sega. The emulator itself was pretty crap. But what makes it interesting is that when you rip the game disc and browse the contents of it, you'll find a file on the root of the disc called echelon.txt. Turns out, this file was indeed referencing the cracking group Echelon. The file itself contains documentation on the emulator that was developed for the pack. There's instructions on how to boot your own Genesis ROMs. The developer that wrote it signed off on the end with, "Don't forget to pay your respects to Uncle Sonic." Sony just doesn't get it. I imagine this was in reference to the fact that Sega was going under as a console maker at the time, since that was announced to the public on the same day that this pack was released. Man, imagine being this developer, knowing that the Dreamcast was getting canned, and yet still having to work on this collection for it. And not only that, imagine being told to slap a Volume 1 on the front of the game, as if there was even a chance of a Volume 2. I guess the note that the dev left was pretty much him saying, "Oh, you want a Volume 2? Okay, sure, make it yourself, idiot. Here's the emulator. Good luck." Back in the Dreamcast homebrew world, a whole load of emulators have been created for it. This thing is a great way to experience older consoles like the Atari 2600, the Intellivision, the ColecoVision, all that weird old stuff. You know what? I don't really care. Let's just move on to the NES. And NES on the Dreamcast is exactly what it sounds like. I'm playing Mega Man 2 with a Dreamcast controller. Very cool. This is running on the Nestor DC SE emulator, and there's really nothing to note here except that NES works, and it works perfectly. Sega Master System games work just as well as NES ones, but this time you get a cool little picture on the VMU. This is the first time I've actually ever played a Master System game, so I don't really know if things are completely running correctly, but as far as I can tell they are. These transitions in Sonic Spinball look just fantastic, but I think that's how they're supposed to look. Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin ran well, even if I couldn't figure out what the heck I was supposed to be doing other than giving the cops a taste of their own medicine. Then I got my ass handed to me in some tennis game. Look at this, I practically handed the win to this asshole. But Master System on the Dreamcast works great. A console I am far more familiar with, though, is the Sega Genesis. The emulator Gens for Dreams brought me great joy as I played through some of the most renowned Genesis classics ever. Animaniacs, Bubsy, and Chester Cheetah. And you know what? The Dreamcast did fantastic while playing these games. Just like the other emulators, I have nothing bad to say about it. Super Nintendo, however, is where I imagined this thing was going to start to struggle a bit, and oh yeah, it did. Think of any hallmark of poor emulation and trust me, you'll find it here. Missing layers? We got those. Crusty audio? You betcha. Sub 100% speed? No problem. Nauseating frame skipping? Coming right up. But yeah, SNES emulation is not great. Also, 2024 is the year of SNES. SNES is canceled. This gameplay was in the emulator SNES for All, but that's not the only one I tried. I also downloaded Dream SNES, which was better sometimes, but also worse sometimes. In Dream SNES, I felt like there were more slowdowns and frame skipping, but generally it worked better and seemed more accurate. You can see in Pac-Man 2 in SNES for All, the black circle that surrounds the scene here is super low resolution and blocky, but in Dream SNES, it looks correct. Dream SNES actually booted Mrs. Pac-Man too, unlike SNES for All, which didn't. With all of that, plus the crappy D-pad on this thing anyway, SNES on the Dreamcast is just kind of more of a novelty. I wouldn't seriously try and play anything on here. GBA emulation, no, I'm just kidding. GBA emulation is a complete mess. This is the GPSP-DC emulator, and from what I can tell, it's the only GBA emulator on here worth giving a damn about. But despite that, no amount of frame skipping or marketing from LEGO could save Galador here. It just sucks. Then I tried Breakout Centipede Warlords because I thought, hey, those are some basic old games. They'll probably run fine. But the ROM didn't even boot, so nope, never mind. Codename Kids Next Door was about as crap as Galador. And with that, my official diagnosis for GBA on the Dreamcast is don't. There was apparently a Nintendo 64 emulator at one point that could boot games, but it couldn't do much more than that. This video from 16 years ago, published by Simpson474, shows it booting Mario 64 and then running really slow. But, I mean, it is running. I can't show it off myself because all the links to it are dead, but based on this footage, it doesn't look like we're missing out on much. PlayStation 1 is a very, very interesting topic on the Dreamcast. There's an emulator that used to be available for purchase called Bleemcast. If that sounds familiar to you, it should, because it was derived from the famous Bleem PS1 emulator for PC. If you don't already know about Bleem, check out both LGR and Gaming Historian's videos. The story surrounding that emulator is really fascinating. Bleemcast boot discs were available for purchase. You'd buy the disc, put it in your Dreamcast, and then swap it out for the PS1 game that matched the boot disc you were using. It was really that simple. Just like that, you could play PS1 games on the Dreamcast. The games themselves even looked and ran better on the Dreamcast than they did on the PS1. I know we kind of expect that for emulators running on PCs nowadays, but this was 1999. That's just crazy. Think about it. This console is struggling to play GBA games here, but PlayStation 1 runs full speed at double the resolution and with video enhancements? Bleem is just magic. But back on track here, Bleemcast only officially had compatibility with 3 games. People were able to exploit a leaked beta version of the Bleemcast emulator to create their own boot discs that worked with other PS1 games. These homebrew versions are referred to as Bleemed games, and I've got 3 to show you right here. The first is Crash Bandicoot, and apart from the audio losing everything except the background music, it's playing like it was just made for the Dreamcast. There are some visual bugs, but for what it is and at the level of performance it's running at, this is nothing short of amazing. Even everybody's favorite Pepsi game is running great, apart from the cutscene at the beginning being entirely destroyed, and some texture glitching here and there, Pepsi Man is completely playable. Parappa the Rapper is not great. The cutscenes are all completely missing. The audio is very chunky. And the animations are all too fast. It's kind of funny to watch because the animations complete too early, so they all kind of just freeze in place until they're supposed to start the next animation. But despite these issues, it does run, and there's 0 slowdowns. And these were just a few games. There's tons of Bleemed games out there. There are some community compatibility lists that document how well certain games work, but they're very incomplete. So your mileage will definitely vary if you try this yourself. But either way, for what this is, I know I already said it earlier, but Bleem and Bleemcast are just magic. And apart from porting games and running emulators on the Dreamcast, there's also a humongous library of completely original homebrew games. And these ones on the Dreamcast, they are world class. The titles you'll find on the Dreamcast are the gold standard for community-made games on any console as far as I'm concerned. However, the lines do kind of blur a bit when it comes to classifying them as homebrew, since a lot of these games are commercial products. And to some people, that's not homebrew. The way I see it, anyone circumventing Sega to get their games on the Dreamcast is making homebrew, whether they're charging for it or not. In fact, if charging for their games means they can keep making more stuff, by all means, I'm all for it. A lot of these games are sold through real publishers, which is pretty cool. It's a concept that I've never really seen before outside of a few new titles for the NES or Game Boy that pop up from time to time. Thanks to the fact that almost any Dreamcast can just run unlicensed games, indie developers can sell their games to anybody that wants to play them, regardless of if their console's been modified or not. Because of this, these developers can reach a fairly sizable audience, and you'll find a level of polish on Dreamcast homebrew games that you just don't see anywhere else. One example of these games is Intrepid Izzy. It's a Metroidvania-style platformer that came out in 2017 by Senile Team. This is just a normal game that came out on Steam, the Nintendo eShop, the Xbox Series consoles, PS4, PS5, and for some reason, the Dreamcast. Why? I don't know. Why not, I guess? I mean, the Dreamcast port runs fantastic. The whole thing looks and feels great to play. I don't know what it took for them to port this game. All I know is that they did it really well, and I'm glad it's here. But you know, do you ever just look at Rocket League and long for a Dreamcast version? Best I can offer is Driving Strikers. It's Rocket League, but very stripped down, and from a completely different camera angle. It plays well enough. I mean, it's a bit janky, but it's not too bad. The part of this game that's really cool though is that the developers also released it on Steam with cross-play to the Dreamcast version. In case you're not sure what that means, it means that in 2024, there is a Dreamcast game being sold today, unofficially, that can connect to and play multiplayer with a Steam game. It's so cursed. I love it. But what else does the Dreamcast have? Xenocider is a third-person rail shooter that looks great. They channeled the Dreamcast era graphics perfectly with this thing. This game is also available on modern platforms, but it hasn't been fully released yet. You can only play the demo. What they've got so far though looks great, and it plays well, and it's also completely unforgiving. I got through the tutorial, got my ass handed to me in level 1 3 times, and then got a game over. Fun game, but fairly difficult. If that's your thing and you're into the late 90s, early 2000s style, then try it out. Sturmwind is a German game by Duranick that actually came out on Dreamcast first in 2013. The version on other platforms came out later in 2019. It's a 2D rail shooter that also recreates the aesthetics of these early 2000s, late 90s games pretty nicely. It's very polished and it plays well, so it definitely makes the list. This is Tunnels. It's Half-Life, but with a giant spider. Oh, wait, hold on. At one point, I paused the game and the whole thing crashed, so that was cool. This guy doesn't even want to fight me. What the heck? As far as I can tell, you're just supposed to walk into one of these tunnels, which eventually leads you back to the main chamber, and then at some point, you gotta kill the spider by just smacking it a bunch. Then you get a screen saying you survived, and then the map reloads. It's obviously more of a tech demo than anything, but I wanted to include it because I thought it just looks cool, and it seems like it would serve as a really nice base if somebody wanted to build an FPS off of it. So, how do I feel about the Dreamcast homebrew scene now that I've experienced what it has to offer? I don't think it's the best, but I also don't think it's the worst. What I do think is that they've got something special. I was hesitant to make this video at first because I assumed that nobody was going to bother doing anything with a failed console with a terrible controller and a crippled storage format. But boy was I wrong. The Dreamcast community has really made the console their own, no doubt about that. And with indie developers choosing to make brand new games for the Dreamcast, they have truly given it a second lease on life. You know, I've had this image of a lost dog in my head while I've been making this video. One where the dog's original owner left them behind because they didn't live up to the owner's expectations. But after finding the right person, the dog was taken in with open arms, and it grew and it thrived. That's the story of the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast lives on today as something greater than it ever used to be. You know, at least to me as someone who never really understood its appeal. It turns out that all it needed was some patience and love from the people that really cared about it. The Dreamcast is old, but it's been taught some new tricks. I'm glad I got to experience them myself. I think I'm finally starting to get it. The Dreamcast was not a successful console. It looked dated even for the time, and the average gamer probably thinks of it as nothing more than the thing that killed Sega home consoles for good, if they even remember it at all. But there is no doubt in my mind that after everything it's been through, and after both Sega and the general public moved on, the Dreamcast didn't just fade away. It found its place and its people, and in that place, and by those people, it's loved just the way it is. Long live the Dreamcast. Nah, I'm just kidding. I still fucking hate this thing. I hate it so much that I'm giving it to you! Want this Dreamcast? It's yours, my friend, as long as you enter the giveaway. You get this Dreamcast, which is the one that's modded with the GD-EMU. You get the SD card, which I'm not erasing, by the way. So everything you saw in the video is pretty much on here. You get a controller that's just as yellow as the console, a VMU with a fresh set of batteries, plus a power and a video cable to actually use it. And how do you enter this mighty fine giveaway of mine? Number 1, like the video. Number 2, subscribe. Number 3, leave a comment. Number 4, have a Discord account. When I draw the winner, I'm going to find the winner's comment on the video, and I'm going to reply to it. And to claim the prize, you then have to reply to me in your comment with your Discord username. So then I can find you on Discord, and we can hash out all the details like the address and all that. This giveaway is open to those in the main 48 states in the US and Canada. I have no confidence in the American postal system to get this thing overseas, so sorry everyone else. But yeah, that's all you gotta do. Check out all these cool social accounts that I made. It's the best way to keep up with whatever the heck it is I'm doing nowadays. And yeah, gaming. The year is 2005. You just left the mall movie theater after a screening of the cinematic masterpiece known as Robots.
Hey kids, get a load of this!
Eager to maximize the amount of fun that could be had on this outing, you scan the retail horizon for your next target. After locking eyes with a GameStop just a few stores down, you ask your dad if you can go inside. He says not to be gone any longer than 15 minutes, which was alright because that's all the time you needed. He wanders off into Circuit City to look for a new 5-disc CD changer, and you make a beeline for GameStop. You were here for the opportunity to command one of the most advanced pieces of portable technology that you had ever laid your eyes and hands on. The Sony PSP, conveniently affixed to a kiosk for your demoing pleasure. My DS is great, you thought, but this is on another level. And 17 years later, I'm still thinking the same thing. Okay, let's get one thing straight. The DS was amazing for what it was. It took portable gaming to the next level and innovated in ways that only Nintendo could. But the Sony PSP had a much simpler goal in mind. Make this into that. Sony didn't set out to make a portable game console. They set out to make a game console portable, and they did a damn good job. The PSP was leagues above the DS, especially the original DS, when it came to, well, anything that was not playing Nintendo games. And spoiler alert, this reason was very quickly invalidated. Graphics? We got them. Analog controls? We got those too. Removable storage? Hell yeah. Optical media? Weird flex, but okay. Friggin' TV out, dude? Hell yeah. I don't know, you wanna call grandma on the PSP, huh? You wanna call your grandma? Look at that, who's gonna stop you? PSP had some real wacky features too. You could even play your PS3 games with this thing remotely. That was a first party feature. And a lot of these things left modders drooling over the potential of the PSP as a platform for homebrew and emulation. And remember, this was 2005. You couldn't just hop onto AliExpress and pick up the first 401 video game console retro portable mini handheld game 3.0 inch color LCD kids color game player built-in 400 games that you saw. We had limited resources to work with here, and the PSP was looking incredibly appealing to fill that void. Unlike the DS, the PSP doesn't really have a digital cartridge slot to play games from, just a weird proprietary optical drive, so devices such as a flashcard were kinda completely out of the question. And I do hear you saying, wait, didn't you say earlier that there was removable storage? And yes, there was, but for the majority of PSPs out there, you couldn't just slap an emulator on the memory stick and call it a day. Programs that you run from the memory stick have to be digitally signed by Sony in order to run, and Sony had no interest in allowing emulators and such to run on their console. So, that's it then, right? We just say GG to Sony, wrap up our controller, and go home? No, this is where the greatest thing in video game console modding history comes into play. The soft mod. There have been many of them over the years, and it's not exclusive to the PSP. On my PSP, I'm running the Pro C2 custom firmware. It's kind of the gold standard nowadays. Custom firmware is kind of like a hacked system update that does all the heavy lifting for you. And after it's installed, that's it. You just load up your memory stick with Homebrew. But what Homebrew? Like the DS, you've got a few basic categories of things that you can do with a Homebrew-enabled PSP. You've got community-made games and applications to check out, retro consoles you can emulate, and backups you can play, which is a very G-rated way to say that you're just gonna pirate the shit out of the entire PSP library. Okay, I'm actually gonna take one step back now to show off something that you actually don't need a modded PSP to do. Web portals were all the rage back in the day. Didn't have a Windows Vista computer? Well, look at that, now you do. Wished you bought the inferior game console? Well, gee, look, there it is, now you did. Web portals on the PSP are just little tiny self-contained websites that you can load up from the memory stick on the built-in PSP web browser. All it really was a little HTML, some JavaScript, a pinch of Shockwave player, nothing the browser couldn't handle. It's just a fun little toy more than anything else, but it's something I completely forgot that I used to do until I started doing research for this video, and I wanted to show it off to anyone that never got a chance to check these out back in the day. Most of them were just made to simulate another electronic device of the time, like Windows Vista, the DS, and there's an iPhone one out there too that I remember playing around with. I found a video of it here, but the download links are all long gone. And if anybody happens to have the files for the iPhone web portal for PSP, send me an email with it because I'd actually love to give it a go one last time. Here's something that you do need a properly soft-modded PSP for. Minecraft, like Doom, is kinda just on everything now, including an unofficial version called Bleemcast here on the PSP. Like DS Craft on the DS, Bleemcraft's lack of analog stick camera input really degrades the experience and makes the whole thing kind of frustrating to use. These shaders here are actually a really nice touch though, and I think the lighting looks really good. It's a neat little proof of concept and not much more, very similar to the DS version. Okay, this one is an early 2000s classic, Jellycar. I played the WiiWare sequel of this game when I was a kid, but this one plays pretty similar to what I remember. Oh, and Jellycar 2, the one that I've played, was an actual game that was published for the PSP at the time, but Jellycar 1, which is what this is a port of, was only ever developed for the Xbox 360, iOS, and Windows. This homebrew port of the first game is using the Xbox 360 version as a base, and it's developed by the same guy that made Bleemcast. It's a pretty fun little game. I think that the official sequel probably plays a little bit better, but that's to be expected, and I'm still just glad it's here. Okay, this one is a little bit bizarre. Your eyes do not deceive you. This is Halo on the Sony PSP. Okay, well, your eyes do deceive you like a little bit because it's actually Quake, albeit a very heavily modded homebrew port of Quake, and it's Halo, I guess. I could not even get past these two dudes right here at the beginning, to be honest with you. The PSP just really falls flat with first-person shooter controls. It just needs another analog stick so bad. Either way, this homebrew is really wacky and cool, and I thought it was worth a mention, but I don't recommend trying it yourself. It's just kind of there. Okay, admittedly, the homebrew games that we've tried so far have been a little bit hit and miss. I know for a fact that there are way better ones out there that are worth trying, but to be honest, I didn't really dabble in that kind of community back in the day, like homebrew community-made games and all that. My interest was in emulation. A couple videos ago when we checked out the DS, it did its best, it wasn't too bad, but the PSP, well, okay, let me just put it into perspective here. The PSP has a DS emulator. Truthfully, it's not very good, and most games are completely unplayable, but the fact that it can even emulate its rival at all is a huge slap in the face to Nintendo, and it's just a testament to how freaking overbuilt this thing was when it came out. The traditional emulators are all here as well. We have NES, Game Boy, even DOS boxes on this thing. SNES emulation in particular is very decent. The PSP runs most SNES games at full speed without a care in the world, while the DS over there kinda just like shits its pants and then dips out. Sick. Genesis performance is very tight, no complaints to be had here. Really, consoles of these calibers don't put up much of a fight on the PSP. GBA is fantastic as well, and to be honest, this is the first way I really played some of the old GBA Pokemon games when I was a kid. The PSP form factor is actually just perfect for it, and it upscales really nicely. And once again, no performance issues whatsoever. It's like the PSP was just purpose-built for this. Now here's where the PSP gets to stretch its legs and show off a little. N64 is pretty trivial to run on the PSP, at least for the games that do run on it. The compatibility list is just okay. A lot of the big hitters though are running really nice here, if not perfect, minus a few texture glitches. N64 games translate over to the PSP pretty well because, you know, just a single analog stick, and the control layout is only missing a few buttons compared to the N64 controller. It's usually not a problem though because of the way the N64 controller is held. Shout out to everyone that does not have 3 hands, you're the ones that are making it work here. And I can't talk about emulators on the PSP without mentioning the official PS1 emulator. So the PSP natively supports a lot of PS1 games. You could purchase them on the PlayStation Store back in the day just like any other game. And obviously the officially supported games run great, and the list of games that made it over is pretty staggering. Having the PSP run PS1 games was a huge selling point for the PSP, at least for me. Sure, the DS could run its previous gen games, but the PSP could run previous gen home console games. Sony drew a line in the sand on where the boys and the men stood with that one. Anyways, eventually the official emulator was cracked wide open. You could inject any CD-ROM image of a PS1 game that you wanted into the games. It would end up leaving you with a nice little clean way to play any of your favorites that were missing. And you got to have separate game icons on the home screen for all those titles as well. It was pretty cool. There's a lot of community-assembled ports of exclusive DLC for other consoles like Tomb Raider Unfinished Business. I'm pretty sure that was a Tomb Raider DLC that never made it over to the PS1, but someone decided to throw it together as a PSP file, so there you go, now you can just play it on the PSP. The official emulator on this thing is some black magic. The rule is essentially, if you have the bin in queue, the PSP will play it.
Meanwhile, Step inside me ship. I'm going to show you a wonderful world of games that you can play all you want, and you won't even have to pay a dime.
But no, seriously, these things are dumb, and these things are good. Say it with me, everybody. Optical media, bad. Playing official games off the memory stick is the way to go. Also, this is gonna be a complete dumbass moment on my part, but when I was a kid and I got my first PSP, I thought that the shell on the outside of the UMDs was just a casing that could be opened and removed. So I kind of just pried one open because I needed to clean the disc. And then I quickly found out that they do not snap back together. So I kind of just scotch taped it back together and like it kind of worked. But the game always had some weird issues after that, like it just wouldn't load some levels. I think it was like Wally, but yeah. Optical media is a mistake, especially with children. But anyways, nowadays you can just toss your games in .iso format onto your memory stick and that's pretty much it. They'll just show up right on the menu. Easier than ever. ISO dumps for PSP games are plentiful out there on the internet, so go ahead and just go download
the tool to dump the games that you own so you can play them legally and stay safe from legal harm. This is a message from Legal Disclaimer Bot 9000.
The PSP, to me, holds a place in my heart that the original Xbox also occupies, but, you know, like a little off to the side, because it's a home console and the PSP is portable, so, you know. Oh, look at that, there's even, like, some Bionicles in here. This is sick. Anyway, by that I mean that it's a platform with exceptional hardware for the time that got cracked wide open by modders, and it let you really realize the whole system potential. The PSP may not have won any sales awards for Sony, but it sure won a place in the hearts and minds of gamers like myself, who couldn't get what the PSP was offering anywhere else. I still think that to this day it's a fantastic platform for homebrew on the go, you know, like with emulation and all that, and with smartphones, Nintendo Switches, and Steam Decks being the size of what they are now, it's looking like a lot more viable of an option to just keep a PSP in your pocket with you, you know, whenever you get those gamer urges, if you know what I mean. Alright, I want to give my patrons a shout out for being the awesome people that they are. And you know what? Screw it. While we're at it, I'm going to shout out the entire Bringus Studios community as a whole. You guys are actually the best YouTube community that I've seen in ages. I get like a really good laugh out of some of the comments I see that you guys are leaving on my videos. And I also see some really good suggestions and feedback with what I'm trying to do here. So thanks everyone. You know, we actually have a lot of fun out here over on the studio main page. We vote on daily polls that are part of larger tournaments. We finished up one already that was for the best video game OST, which Super Mario Galaxy ultimately won, understandably. There have been some real spicy matchups, and I will admit I've shed a few tears myself. We've lost some good weapons. But anyway, it's a good time. That's it for this video. Let me know some of the best memories you have with the PSP scene back in the day in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.
So you can see right here, I'm getting ready to serve. All I do is throw that ball up in the air, and when oh!
Man, I miss those days. Ah, the Nintendo Wii. A console that has its feet firmly planted in the past, yet somehow feels more present than ever nowadays. When you think of games along the lines of Super Mario Galaxy, Skyward Sword, Super Paper Mario, etc., you don't immediately think, oh yeah, those old games. Well, unless you fall outside my target age range, I guess, on the younger end, and you do immediately think that. And to the rest of us, I extend an invitation to the We're Getting Old support group, because these games are 15, 11, and 16 years old, respectively. Those with glasses a little less rose-tinted than mine are probably thinking, yeah, no shit, that was a while ago. Sounds about right. And deep down, while I do realize that, it still feels like it was just the other day that I was hearing this sound for the first time. And while back then, hearing this sound meant that you were about to go on some incredible adventure or create some awesome memories, nowadays I just hear it and I think, wow, the DVD drive still works on this one. It sucks to hear, but just like us, this thing's getting old too. Oh, also the support group does have Smash Night on Tuesdays and Fridays, but it's BYOC. The sticks are getting a little too worn out on the community controllers, so yeah. The upside to the Wii being fairly prehistoric at this point is that I've had a long time to make a lot of good memories with it. The Wii is home to countless amazing games, the best of which is easily
the one you played the most.
Man, what a great game that was, huh? Truly the best. And like a fine wine, these games just kept getting better and better throughout the Wii's lifespan. Any decent console would have loved to have games like Skyward Sword, Xenoblade Chronicles, and Driver San Francisco released during their twilight years. And while the Wii was flourishing above ground, things were getting just as hot for everybody under it. The Wii was the first game console I personally ever modded. I vividly remember being a 9 or 10-year-old kid just watching YouTube one day and seeing a video where someone was playing Pokemon Fire Red on their Wii. Man, let me tell you, my mind was blown. They used some weird channel called the Homebrew channel and some app called Visual Boy Advance GX. I went and frantically booted up my Wii and then went to the Wii Shop channel and looked for both the Homebrew channel and Visual Boy Advance GX. Oh, to be this naive again. Obviously, couldn't find them. And looking back, to me this whole experience was like finding the hidden laser suit Super Mario World video and trying to jump right between these two blocks for hours on end to try and get the laser gun, even though there was absolutely no chance that was gonna happen. And yes, I did do this for hours on end. I was a pretty gullible child. The point is that this video of Pokemon Fire Red that I had watched lit a fire in me that's still burning to this day. That day, I realized that we're not bound by what Nintendo or Sony or Microsoft lets us do with our consoles. No, it's like the other way around, really. My console was about to be bound by what I decided I was gonna do with it, and god damn it, I decided it was gonna be playing Pokemon Fire Red, even if it took secretly stealing the SD card out of the family Canon PowerShot camera. After a week of trial and error with outdated YouTube tutorials and GBA temp threads, using the power of a Lego Batman save file hack, I had installed the Homebrew channel, my first emulator, and my first soft mod on any console. But that was all 13 years ago, and playing GBA games on the Wii is far from the coolest thing that you can do with it nowadays. But what can you do with it nowadays? A shining example of what a homebrew game port should be is Quake on the Wii. It runs amazing. It's compatible with the PC version's assets as well. All you gotta do is drag and drop pack files along with the Wii binaries to your SD card, and the controls will already be set up and ready to play with a GameCube controller. This is a fantastic port, and I really have nothing bad to say about it at all. It's genuinely a great way to play Quake. There's also a control method for using the Wii remote to aim, which is pretty nifty. And after playing Quake, I naturally decided to go seek out Half-Life. There's a project out there called Zash 3D Wii, which aims to port Zash 3D, the open source version of Valve's gold source game engine, to the Wii. But unfortunately, this project's been left unfinished, which really surprises me because Zash 3D has been ported to all kinds of consoles, like the 3DS and the Switch. I assumed that it already would have been done on the Wii. There is source code available for what they have done so far, but I couldn't figure out if the current code is going to be all that functional, and I don't really want to go down the rabbit hole of compiling it myself just for it to not work at all. I'll leave a link to the GitHub page for it in the description if you want to check it out yourself. I'd love to see this project keep going. But you know what I do want to go down the rabbit hole of compiling, though, is Super Mario 64 for the Wii. And I already hear you saying, bruh, there's already Mario 64 on the Wii Virtual Console, lol, big idiot. Oh yeah, well does your Virtual Console copy do this?
It's me, Mario!
So this is a port of the decompiled source code for Super Mario 64. It's pretty fucked. And like I said, I did have to compile this myself, but it wasn't too bad. The author has a Docker guide available on GitHub, so it's as simple as entering a few commands if you've already got a Docker environment set up. Then you just supply your own ROM to pull assets from, and it spits out a DOL file. Obviously, the code doesn't do a very good job, but between the flying SpaghettiOs text boxes and Mario's extra large mustache, this port had me on my ass for a few minutes at the sheer absurdity of what's happening on the screen. It's some pretty good shit. It seems like the game itself is still really playable. It's just the graphical glitches that you're seeing here. So if you already know what you're doing in Mario 64, this is still pretty playable. And I already know what I'm doing in Mario 64, so that kind of makes me want to stream a playthrough of this or something. I'm sure the deeper into this you get, the crazier it gets. Let me know if that's something you guys would watch. I'm down to do it. And you know, one game that I didn't even know how to decompilation project until now was a little game called Sonic Mania, and it's running great on the Wii. It feels like this could have just come out as regular old WiiWare or something. Obviously, the Wii wasn't still relevant when Mania came out, but, you know, I mean, that didn't stop Just Dance 2019, just saying, Sega. The only times that it runs less than stellar are during load screens, which take a relatively fat minute to load, and during the special stage, which nearly grinds the whole thing to a halt. The regular stages, from what I did play though, feel great. This is easily one of my favorite games to get on a modded Wii now. Well, I've covered Minecraft a few times already on this channel. We've looked at DS Craft on the DS, Lamecraft on the PSP, and Questcraft on the Oculus Quest 2. And that train, or minecart, isn't derailing here. Nope. Because I've got yet another homebrew Minecraft clone for ya called Cavex. It aims to simulate the Minecraft Beta 1.7.3 experience specifically, which it does at a rock-solid 60 FPS, I might add. And I'm not really certain which side of the port versus remake scale CaveX lands on, since it's written in C and not Java, and the game doesn't really feel right considering you're permanently no-clipping around. However, it is close enough to the original that you can load maps from similar beta versions that were made on PC, which is kinda nuts. Other than the perma no-clipping, some other unfortunate drawbacks to this version include a sadism-inspired control scheme, considering you look with the nunchuck and move with the D-pad. I just don't really understand why it's like this here, because you have a perfectly good and genuinely accurate camera control method right here. And I'm no Wii Homebrew dev, but it seems like it would just make a hell of a lot more sense to implement motion controls over asking my left thumb to violate its employment contract. Janky control method aside, this is probably the second most fleshed out version of Homebrew Minecraft that I've ever personally tested, the first being Questcraft, which runs the latest version of Minecraft Java for PC. But you know what? This is just playable enough on here to create a Moog with only little difficulty, so A+ in my book. Sidestepping from ports, the Wii's emulation potential is pretty well known at this point. It's extremely similar to that of the original Xbox in its capability to play retro games. But the Wii does have one additional ace up its sleeve, and that is Virtual Console. There are countless official Nintendo licensed emulators on the Wii already, from NES to Genesis to N64, and with N64 emulation specifically, the existence of Virtual Console is great, because the N64 emulator that Nintendo developed is really good, and we can just steal their homework and swap out their ROMs for one of ours, and for the most part, it'll just work. These are known as VC injections, and it's a great way to play N64 games on the Wii. If you do want to take a more traditional approach though, there are both Not 64 and Wii 64, which are also pretty good emulators made by the community. Anything less powerful than the N64 will run fantastic on the Wii. The Wii is great for NES, SNES, Game Boy, GBA, Genesis, yeah, all that good stuff. But there are three particular consoles that intrigued me when it comes to emulation on the Wii. The first being PlayStation 1. I wanted to know just how well it would do here because PlayStation 1 is a particular weak point on the original Xbox, and unfortunately, it is here too. This was using PCSXR for the Wii, and the performance was, well, I mean, it's hard to call it performance at all, really. So I turned to Wii SX, another PS1 emulator for the Wii, which almost worked. I tried both Spyro the Dragon and Parappa the Rapper, but neither of them would get more than a few seconds past their splash screens. According to this compatibility list, both of these games should work, so I don't really know. Maybe I have a shitty SD card or something, and I've ran these ROMs on other consoles and they've ran fine, so I don't know. I can't personally recommend PS1 on the Wii. To me, it's more trouble than just using a modded PS1 Classic or something, but supposedly this emulator is good when it works. I don't know, take that as you will. But the thought of emulating DS on the Wii is even more mind-blowing to me. These two systems were out at the same time, and I guess the DS was weak hardware, but something just feels so wrong about booting up a game that has a Wii connection feature on a Wii. But booting is as far as you're about to get though, because it's lag city, baby. It technically works, which in emulation is the worst kind of works. Don't expect to seriously play any DS games here. Also, this compatibility chart for the emulator is very misleading. There's a whole rank here called Works Decently, which is implied to be worse than Works because it's yellow, and Error is red. Yet, the Pokemon games are all Works and not Works Decently, despite running at a sub 10 FPS. And it's not even just me living in my own little world here with a fucked up install or anything, because even they specify that it runs very slow. Anyways, question for you. Have you ever played this? Not gonna lie, it kinda sucks, but it's worth playing once or twice in real life on the arcade machine it was made for. So I played it on my Wii. The Mario Kart Arcade GP series of arcade machines runs on a system called the Triforce, which was more or less just a repackaged GameCube made by Nintendo, Sega, and Namco. If you look at teardowns of this thing, they literally just have GameCube motherboards sandwiched in between other custom PCBs made by Sega and Namco. And come to think of it, you know what else is more or less a repackaged GameCube? You guessed it. Through the use of a custom MIOS, or MIOS, I don't know, which is kinda like custom firmware for specifically the GameCube part of the Wii, you can boot into some of these Triforce games on the Wii. I only tested Mario Kart Arcade GP2 here, and aside from some stuttering in the menus, the game itself runs really well. There's only a handful of games that were ever made for the Triforce system, and even less of them will really even run here. But it's a really cool oddity, and I'm glad that someone decided to make them playable on the Wii. It just adds to the already wacky nature of Wii Homebrew. And you know, if you want to see another wacky repackaged GameCube, click the link at the top corner here where you can see my GameCube Mini version 2 that I built from scratch last year. It's less than half the size of a regular GameCube. This thing is sick. Okay, I'm gonna quickly touch on the two big names in backup loading on the Wii. USB Loader GX and Nintendo. Between these two, they allow you to load up Wii and GameCube games right from the SD card or USB port on the Wii. There's a ton that you can do here in USB Loader GX. It might as well just be a replacement for the default Wii menu, to be honest with you. It can load your regular Wii channels as well as your backups and Homebrew all from one app. Nintendo, on the other hand, it works super well to run GameCube ISOs, and it also supports memory card emulation. You don't even have to break out the old Mad Catz memory cube anymore. This is crazy. The best part about Nintendo, in my opinion, though, is that you can load USB HID drivers as well as some Bluetooth ones for all kinds of controllers. Like the entire DualShock family works, Xbox 360 controllers work, and Xbox One, the Switch Pro controller, and most importantly, the official USB GameCube controller adapter. And why is that important? We've got these right here. Well, there's a good percentage of Wiis out there that don't have GameCube controller ports due to some brain-dead cost-cutting from Nintendo, and no Wii U's have GameCube ports, so to play GameCube on the Wii U with a GameCube controller, this is far and away your best option. Oh yeah, did I mention that almost all Wii Homebrew is also compatible with the Wii U? Yeah, it's pretty neat. Something that I had never really got a chance to mess with much as a kid were mods for existing Wii games. Back in 2010, the closest thing I ever got to modifying Wii games was with Ocarina codes, which are essentially the same thing as Action Replay if you've ever used one of those on the DS or the GameCube. Ocarina codes are their own kind of fun, but what I really want to show off are some full-blown community-developed mods, one of which being newer Super Mario Bros. I think you can probably figure out what the premise of this one is. The newer team who worked on this spent 3 years developing this thing, and they cranked out 128 unique levels that feel right at home with the original ones. It's got new graphics, new music, new worlds, new bosses. It's basically the Super Mario Galaxy 2 moment for new Super Mario Bros. I can't recommend this game enough if you're like me and you've already decimated the original game like 3 times over. Keeping with the theme of adding more content to existing games, Mario Kart Wii CTGPR is an amazing mod that lets you play over 200 community-made tracks, many of which bring back retro tracks that Nintendo never ported over, like my personal series favorite here, Wario Coliseum, which, I might add, is a travesty because this course pops off super hard, and I really want to see Nintendo add it to a booster update very badly. Anyway, it kind of pops off a little too hard here. CTGPR also backports 200cc mode, which as you can see kind of breaks shit. The courses I played with 200cc ranged from easy to hard to skill issue to completely broken. I'm glad it's here, but you have to play it differently than you might expect. And I'm not talking about like using your brake like you have to in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Here, the extra momentum that you get has to be managed properly. You can't just full send it off a boosted ramp and expect to make it to the other side in one piece. The courses don't compensate for that. But anyway, this mod also brings back online play, something never in a million years I would have thought was possible. I didn't personally try it, but from what I've been able to see, it looks no different than what I remember Mario Kart Wii Online being like back when I used to play it and it was still supported by Nintendo years ago. Between stuff like this and X-Link Kai, it makes me really happy to see that online play is coming back for these older games that I never ever would have thought we'd ever be able to play online again. And there's a whole lot more to CTGPR than I'm gonna even cover here, so I seriously recommend you check it out if you're a big fan of Among Us. Bet you thought I was gonna say Mario Kart Wii here. Get pranked, son, you sussy little baka. Next up is Project M. This is a mod I am personally super familiar with. This single mod created loads of friendships with people that I still hang out with to this day. So many memories of hooking this thing up at my high school with a portable LCD, click GameCube sticks with some buddies for hours until the activity bus would arrive at like 5 p.m. Oh man, good times. As for the mod itself, it's a mod for Super Smash Bros. Brawl that makes it more Melee-like and encourages competitive play a lot more than stock Brawl does. And take it from me, your local Melee hater, this mod is great. It reintroduces high-speed gameplay and more advanced tech, and it leaves all the silliness out. You know, like tripping over yourself for no goddamn reason. God, I hate stock Brawl. Just about every single character's moves and movements have been changed as well, so it may not play exactly like Brawl if that's what you're used to, but they're all pretty close, and they're worthy changes in the name of better balancing. I'm not as good as I was back in the day. A lot of my muscle memory for Project M has evolved for Smash 4 and then for Ultimate, but it's still a really enjoyable Smash game, and if you're picking from the 3 options that still have an active community on the Wii between Melee, Brawl, and Project M, I'm picking Project M. And like CTGPR, you can play online, but I'm not really as familiar with this process or if you can even do it on real Wii hardware. I've only seen it done in Dolphin, and I've only ever played couch multiplayer myself. Also, a little footnote, all the mods that I've touched on here have their own installation processes, but for a lot of other mods, you are going to probably end up using Revolution. It's like the bog standard mod loader on the Wii. But have you ever wanted to play Guitar Hero on your Wii but didn't have this game?
No.
No, you didn't? Okay, well, have you ever wanted to make a sick beat on the menu screen?
No.
No to that too. All right then. Well, have you ever wanted to play Guitar Hero with a GameCube controller?
No.
Yes, I hear the people saying, yes, we do. And we're just gonna mute these guys real quick. Okay, yes, let's do it. All right, well, I have the game just for you. It's Guitars on Fire, I struggle to say original homebrew game for the Wii, more than likely inspired by the PC Guitar Hero clone Frets on Fire. And while this is a fine game, I don't have a Wii Guitar Hero controller, so I'm left to fumble around with a GameCube controller instead. The buttons are mapped with R being green, A being blue, X being red, Y being yellow, and B being orange, intuitively. Also, you get insulted when you lose. It's a nice touch.
You've just found a new way to suck.
And that brings me to X-axis. Man, what the fuck? Supposedly, it's a procedurally generated shooter. In reality, God help me, I couldn't figure out how to move from this pivot point, or even if you're supposed to at all, and there's only 2 guns, neither of which have an ammo counter and have similar cooldown times, but there's one that shoots rockets, and it's so much better than this other one. I don't even know why you'd use this tennis ball gun looking ass one. The rockets that the other one fires seems like they have a way better AoE, and they also home to their targets. This gun is just way better in every way. I got past level 1, but for the life of me, I cannot beat level 2. Snakes and eldritch horrors I can handle, but when you break out the, God, I don't even know, man. I can't even think of a joke for this one. What is this supposed to be? I don't understand what I'm looking at. And then there's dinosaurs or something, and oh yeah, also the Bow-Rock from Bionicle are here. I do want to see what other nightmare creatures await you in this game, but I genuinely can't get past level 2, so unfortunately we're going to be living in mystery for the rest of our lives. This right here is another original homebrew game called I'm gonna go with Nuo Shooter, which I imagine was inspired by early Star Fox games. It's pretty technically impressive according to my never made a Wii game before ass. It controls pretty jankily. You're supposed to use the pointer to shoot and then the D-pad to move, but this kinda hurt my brain, so I enabled waggle controls, but this was a mistake because I underestimated how awful it would be to try to point at a particular spot on the screen, but also rotate the Wii remote around at the same time. You have to move like one of these robotic arm things and keep the pointer in exactly the same spot while you shimmy around. But in general, homebrew games like this are good fun. But whenever I play them, there's always this like primal caveman voice in the back of my head. It's the same one that gets excited by bright and beautiful graphics and grand cinematic experiences, and when homebrew games don't live up to the expectations that I subconsciously have for what a video game should be, it almost makes them feel pointless. I mean, you can argue that they're the ultimate expression of not only persistence, but also creativity and freedom in the gaming world. But something in me will always wonder if homebrew games really have value. Despite being this result of passionate hobbyists who reject the idea that you have to be a real game dev in order to create a game, does it matter? Does any of that matter? It doesn't really change anything. Even though these people made something without publishers or without dev kits and without budgets, at the end of the day, the only thing that comes from that is a worse product comparatively. Sure, they make do with only a fraction of what Nintendo's got, but again, at the end of the day, all that results in is a worse experience. There's nothing stopping you from putting Nuo Shooter up against a game like Panzer Dragoon Orta and nitpick it to death. The graphics here are better, the gameplay is better, the control scheme is better, the art style is better. You could sit here and tear Nuo Shooter apart piece by piece all day long, and you would be objectively correct about everything that you say about it. And it's not even the devs' fault. All the effort in the world isn't enough for a single guy to hold their own against multi-million-dollar companies that make games like these. So then, does Nuo Shooter have any value? The developer probably went through hell and back developing it. I mean, I'm sure all they had to work with was unofficial tools and documentation, which is bound to be a hindrance. But as admirable as that whole struggle is, the struggle itself can't give Nuo Shooter any intrinsic value. And let me define what I mean by intrinsic value here. If something has intrinsic value, it means it has value by itself because of what it is. For example, true happiness may be the most pure form of intrinsic value because, well, being happy feels good and feeling good is valuable. Happiness doesn't depend on anything else to be valuable to you. It just is. And then as the opposite of that, you could think of money. And I'm not trying to say here, oh, money can't buy you happiness, because that's some false boomer bullshit. What I'm saying is that money is valuable because it buys you happiness. When you win a $100 bill, you don't value it for being what it is, because what it is a green piece of paper. You value that green piece of paper for what it represents. The physical $100 bill is merely a vessel to lead you to what is actually valuable. This is called extrinsic value. In order for these kinds of things to be valuable, they depend on something with intrinsic value to back them up. Extrinsic value can also be taken away if what it depends on is taken away. So if money didn't let you buy the things that you want or the things that you need, it would no longer have any value at all. And with homebrew games, they have a value beyond what you can see and beyond what you experience while playing them. And I realize it's a gross generalization to say that no homebrew game is good or no homebrew game has any intrinsic value, but at least for some of the things you'll find on game consoles like the DS or Wii, some of these homebrew games' value comes from something more than just the game that they are. These games matter so much because of what they represent. They represent the persistence of people who refuse to stay inside of the walled garden that a Nintendo or a Sony will set up for us to play safely in. And probably most important of all, they represent the idea, fuck you, I want to do this, so I'm going to do it. Homebrew games are not just games. They're what drive people to keep the homebrew and hacking community alive. They inspire people to push the limits of what's possible with their old video game technology. Statements that can do that have incredible value, and for that reason, so do the games that represent them. And as long as people value being able to make whatever they want with their own hardware, nobody can take that value away. Congratulations, you made it to the end! I also want to note that I'm not dogging on Nuo Shooter for any particular reason here. It's just an example. You could swap it out with any other homebrew game. I have nothing but respect for people that dev homebrew stuff. I want to make that clear. They're way more skilled at programming than I will ever be. And the same dev that made Nuo Shooter actually made like 10 different games for the Wii, and he's still active and developing for the Wii to this day. He's a goddamn legend. But I'll even drop his Twitter in the description. And if you want to see more homebrew overviews like this, I've got videos out for the DS, the PSP, the 3DS, and the Quest 2 all on my channel right now, and there's always more coming, so get subscribed and let me know which console you want to see me cover next in the comments. And if you want to see me, the Bringle man himself, I am going to be at LTX this year in Vancouver, Canada. And the first person that approaches me there will get a, you know, like the meaty part of your hand, like right under your thumb. I'll sign that. And if you're looking for more Wii videos, I just published one where I created my own Wii XL. It's over 12 times the volume of the original, so if you're into thick Wiis, I got you. Check out my Patreon if you want to support the creation of new videos, and with that, I'll see you in the next one. I am a VR person through and through. Well, not like this. Bruh. The day Google released the Google Cardboard, you bet I shoved my phone in that stupid little box, and I had a grand old time. After that, I had the original Oculus Rift. That's the thing that truly opened my mind to what an immersive gaming experience can be. Wow. The motion controls and the 3D environments that you could be in, it was just such a massive jump ahead in technology compared to anything else at the time. The closest I had ever got to any other immersive gaming experience before this was probably the 3DS, which is just about as immersive as, you know, staring at a 3-inch screen, I guess. What, do you expect a joke here or something? Huh? What, do you think I'm some funny internet man or something, huh? I'll show you a funny internet man. Oh, wait. No, I can't. Look at this guy right here. Everybody knows this guy. He made this thing right here. The Meta Quest.
Why did you do that?
Take it back.
Take what back?
Call it by its name, damn it.
Call it by what?
The Oculus Quest 2.
What?
We do not say meta in this household. Rip Oculus. After their acquisition in 2014, which was 9 years ago, by the way, Oculus was slowly absorbed into Facebook, which then became
Meta.
Which is why this is here. I hate this so much. Some of the earlier models do still say Oculus on them, and you bet your ass I'm jealous of the people that got that one. See, I used to have a first generation Vive after wanting a bit more out of my Oculus Rift, and that Vive is where I enjoyed and discovered a lot of my favorite VR games like Beat Saber, Gorn, Robo Recall, Davi Go, Diner Duo, and of course, Half-Life Alyx. But if I had such good experiences with the Vive, why would I trade it for the Zuck box? Wasn't by choice. Between now and then, a lot of life has happened. I've just needed to downsize here and there. Even now, I don't, really have the proper room to do room scale VR. And with that in mind, that is where this starts making a bit more sense. I don't have to be tethered to my PC with this thing. I can take it wherever I want. And I know what you guys are thinking, so I'm just gonna come out and say it. Yeah, it works at Quiznos. It's not the perfect solution because, yes, you are compromising on visual quality, since it's basically like an Android phone inside of the headset doing all the work. But god damn it, dude, it's a lot better than playing no VR at all, I'll say that. The tracking, also, not the best, but I'm also a bit spoiled coming from the Vive, which had these dedicated base stations for tracking. But again, for what this is, the inside-out tracking method that it uses is not too bad. Does this right here look like a guy who's getting bogged down nitpicking about tracking stations and stuff to you? No, this guy's having a great time. What I'm trying to say here is the Quest 2, despite that, is pretty awesome, and it's the perfect headset for my needs. But if you know a thing about me and my studio here, you'd know that I'm built different, and a VR headset needs to do a lot more than just play VR games to impress me. So, the Quest 2, being Android-based, can run your typical Android phone and tablet games. You have to sideload everything as APK files. It's actually pretty easy. You use this app called SideQuest. I'm not going to get into it in this video, but I am going to link a video in the description of someone who does a better job of explaining it than I would, so go check that out if you want to install it yourself. Keep in mind, though, that there are no Google Play services here, and some games just straight up will not work without it. And I did try to look this up myself, and in my search I came across this video.
VMOS Pro is an Android virtual machine app that allows users to run a separate Android operating system within their current Android device.
And I guess this is an app that will run Google Play services in a virtual machine, and not only would this solution probably run horrible, but then the guy in the video goes on to say,
VMOS.com. Yep, it's the one with the funny Chinese characters.
So I did not do that. But I did download some old school Android games that shouldn't need Google Play services to run. And while Angry Birds here didn't work at all because it's just broken, Jet Car Stunts didn't work here because the game uses gyro controls for steering. And I tried everything I could think of and I looked around in all the settings here, but for the life of me, I could not find a way to make the game think that I was tilting the device. So I would suspect that any games that use motion control for their control scheme are going to be a no-go. Kind of crazy that we have all of this motion control sensors and gyro sensors and everything in these controllers, yet Mark Facebook himself could not be bothered to implement any of them in a way that could play regular Android games, despite every other Android device pretty much ever having the hardware and the support for motion controls in games. Just want to shake his stupid little reptilian neck. Or maybe it is actually doable and really simple, and I'm just a stupid asshole. Could be either. Piano Tiles worked pretty well though. And after that, I went to go try Piano Tiles VR, which is a thing. And then it told me that I needed to set up hand tracking, which I had no idea about at the time. So I got all that set up. And then I just kind of had to stop for a second because my mind was blown. I had no idea you could do this. What's even cooler is that it actually works pretty well. I mean, at least it seemed to when I was playing Piano Tiles VR specifically. Also, I'm sure this game has the proper licenses from Disney to use these Stormtrooper and Yoda models. This game is pretty janky and unresponsive, and eventually I just adopted the strategy that the Stormtroopers were demonstrating, and then after doing that, the game was much easier. Also, at some point, my VR space station house thing disappeared, so now I'm kind of just, floating in space?
I'm in space.
Anyway, after the riveting experience that was Piano Tiles VR, I wondered if there were any other Android titles that had, a proper VR counterpart. And that had caused me to stumble upon Angry Birds VR. This is way more polished since it's an officially licensed game. And to be honest, this is a really decent take on Angry Birds in a 3D space. I had a lot of fun launching these dudes around. This guy doesn't get a chance though. Screw this guy.
Please, no!
There's some other games I found for the Quest 2 that will take traditionally PC games and then kinda just shoehorn in VR support, like Questcraft. I was instantly amazed when I got into the menu here and saw just how huge the scale of a Minecraft block really is. You just don't realize until they're right in front of your face like this. And Questcraft, as far as I can tell, it's not only a port of Minecraft to the Quest 2, but also just a port of Minecraft Java in general to Android, which is crazy. This isn't like a modified version of the typical Android Bedrock edition. This is the full, latest version of Minecraft Java for PC.
Minecraft Java.
Welcome.
You can chop down trees with your fist, make a crafting table, fall into an underground pool of water without knowing how to swim, you know, as you do. The list goes on and on. It runs horrible, which you would expect from running the full PC version of the game here, but the fact that it's here at all is really cool. It's a shame that Microsoft never gave Bedrock Pocket Edition official VR support, because if this was more polished, I feel like it would be really fun. Lambda 1 VR is a mod along the same lines as Questcraft, but with Half-Life 1. This runs significantly better than Questcraft, which I would hope from a game from 1998. This was really cool to play. I was inside of the cutscene that I've seen 100 times. I was actually a passenger on the train that takes you to Black Mesa. I just thought that was really cool. But then I saw this ugly motherfucker. Yeah, for some reason, the HD models are enabled in this port, so that's gross.
Oh, that's real nice.
Anyway, I got into the Black Mesa building, got my HEV suit, and then really I only made it down the elevator before I started feeling like I was gonna blow chunks. So just to be safe, I called it quits. It's a great experience, don't get me wrong. It's totally worth trying. I just don't really have the stomach for games that have you smoothly walking most of the time. And don't even get me started on characters jumping in VR. Ooh. There's also Half-Life 2 VR mods out there, but those don't run natively on the Quest 2 like this does. You'd have to use Quest Link for that. And speaking of Quest Link, the Quest 2 obviously is a purpose-built standalone VR headset, but that doesn't stop it from working like a tethered one too. And what's even better is that you're not tethered at all. At least that's the theory. So there's a feature on this thing called AirLink that lets you play your PC, Oculus Rift, and Steam VR games like if you had a Valve Index or Vive or a Rift. Now, I know what you're thinking. You can hardly get TV shows to stream reliably over your Wi-Fi. Streaming VR must be an awful time with how sensitive people are to frame drops and lag and all that. Yeah, no, I'm just gonna get motion sickness if I try that.
But as it turns out, that might be what you get.
Yeah, it's not great. Here, my girlfriend and I are both playing the Diner Duo. It's a pretty cool asymmetric VR game where one of you is manning the grill and making orders, and the other one is taking and serving the orders. I used Oculus AirLink to play this, since it's a Steam VR game, and you can see on the capture here that my VR gameplay actually looks really smooth, but in reality, it was not great. Here, it only managed to capture what Steam VR was sending to the Quest, not what I was receiving. And trust me, what I was receiving is far worse than what you see here. If I had to describe it, I'd say that 75% of the time, it was fine. But then it would freeze for like a whole second or drop the FPS down to like 10, and then I'd suddenly get very, very aware of my stomach. But luckily, you also do get the option of connecting a Type-C cable and sending the video feed that way. I'd even call it a okay experience, really. And you know what? Quality aside, I'm just really glad I actually got to boot up Half-Life Alyx again after over a year and a half without being able to have a way to play it. But initially, it was pretty rocky. Things were stuttering and lagging, and I had to go change some settings, and after that, it smoothed out. When OBS is recording, it needs me to bump things down a notch in order to keep the frame rate consistent. Well, is it better than the Vive? No, not really. The screen on here is a little nicer. I remember the screen door effect being much more of an issue on the Vive than it is here on the Quest 2. Despite being directly connected to the PC, there's a really noticeable amount of latency and video compression, and the tracking felt like it had absolutely no idea what was going on sometimes. It was pretty noticeable every time I had to reach behind myself to grab ammo, and it could get screwy enough to actually give me trouble throwing these grenades around, and I ended up blowing myself up. Twice. But I'll give this thing the benefit of the doubt. I'll try something a little lighter. Among Us VR is...
Get the flip out of here.
I witnessed that. something. I have never felt like I did not belong somewhere more than I did while inside of this game.
He was trying to skip.
Anyway, it seems like it ran a lot better than Half-Life Alyx did, but at the same time, you're doing a lot less precise movement in Among Us compared to Half-Life Alyx, so kinda up in the air how I feel about Quest Link. It just seems like it should be a lot better. I mean, I'm directly connected to my PC. Why shouldn't it work as good as a Rift S, you know? I've also had some friends tell me that it works no problem for them, so it's just kind of one of those things that might work differently for everybody, I guess. So if it works great for you, then great. But for me, it was finicky at best and pretty broken at the worst.
Hey guys, if you vote me, you guys are racist because I'm black.
Oh. One thing that Android does best is running emulators. I picked newer consoles to emulate this time around compared to my other videos, because we all know that this thing is going to be able to run NES, Genesis, GBA, Atari, all that light stuff. It's not going to be a problem here. So I decided to start off my emulation adventure with the DS and Drastic. This is a paid app that emulates the Nintendo DS, and it's easily the best performing DS emulator for Android. I bought it years ago on Google Play, and obviously the Quest 2 doesn't have Google Play services, so I had to sideload the APK manually like everything else on here. Either way though, it absolutely refused to open up anything in my internal storage, and no amount of messing with the permissions or reinstalling the app or force close and clearing the data, nothing would get this thing to work. So unfortunately, I have no idea how DS runs on here. This dude right here got it to work on the Quest 1, and it looks pretty good for him, so I assume it would run fine on the Quest 2. But how about some good news? PlayStation 1 games run great on the Quest 2. It's got enough power to handle PS1 no problem. No slowdowns or horrible frame times, it's just great. Dreamcast via Raycast runs really well here. This is my first experience with Dreamcast emulation actually, and I'd say that the Quest 2 is handling it just fine. It's pretty cool to be able to play on such a relatively big screen in my field of vision, and everything looks really sharp, it's great. GameCube is pretty much more of the same. From what I could tell, there's no slowdowns and everything seems to be working alright. I wish I had more to say about the PS1, the Dreamcast, and the GameCube, but to be honest, when it comes to emulation, the less I have to say, the better. After a while, you forget you're playing games in an emulator and you just play the games. That's how it should be. Anyway, the good news is now over. Wii is up next and it's running? Not at 100% speed, I can tell you that. I played around with the settings to see if I could get any more performance out of it, and I even tried a fork of Dolphin called MMJR, which is supposed to run better, but like the DS, I couldn't get this working either. Wii emulation seems like it might be just a bit past what the Quest 2 is comfortable with running, in my experience at least. But if you can make it run well on yours, then you get a Bringus Studios seal of a good job, gamer. N64 is super perfectly not bad. I don't know. I guess it's good. GoldenEye chugged a little bit, but Mario 64 was spot on. Also, on the subject of Mario 64, there is a source port of Mario 64 to the Quest 2 that lets you look around and see everything in first person from Mario's point of view, which is pretty cool. And that leads me into the Sony PSP, which is easily the best emulator here. And the reason I say that is because it does this. You can look around in the game world of the game that you're emulating. Dude, I don't know what kind of unholy black magic fury the PPSSPP VR devs had to summon to get this thing working, but it is crazy to experience. It's so cool. I love this so much that I went back to add more PSP ISOs to my Quest 2. I just want to see what other stuff I can look at in some of my favorite games. This game right here is Mercury, a physics-based puzzle platformer, and you are definitely not supposed to be able to look behind yourself like this, but fuck it, we're playing on the Quest 2, so I don't care. I'm gonna do it anyway. You know what? Screw the rules. There are no rules. I'm gonna boot up Tony Hawk's Underground 2 Remix, start a new game, look exactly this far to the left during this cutscene, and then stare at this van right here that I bet nobody else has ever seen in their entire life, because how could they? I'm not first at much in life, but between finishing and seeing this van, I come first, baby. I tried to think of some of the best games to try this out on, and of course that meant trying Wipeout Pure. This was awesome. Being able to see the scale and the size of the ships and the track and everything. Now that I'm going back and watching this recording, I realize it pretty much looks like any other gameplay of Wipeout. It just doesn't do it justice. But if you have a Quest 2, you have to see this for yourself. This game has such a beautiful world and there's so much to look at while you're racing. It's just awesome. The final PSP game that I tried was Star Wars Battlefront 2 because I thought, I don't know, it'd be neat, but actually it was just vomit-inducing for whatever reason, so I didn't really spend much time in here after all. But anyway, PSP emulation on the Quest 2 is sick. If I was She Says, I'd be watching my back. This thing's gonna put him out of business. Anyway, taking a sidestep from gaming, what good would this thing be if you can't watch Bringus Studios videos on it? YouTube and web browsing as a whole really works pretty good. And the built-in browser can detect when you're full screening a video and it'll change itself to theater mode and you just get this massive screen to watch your videos on. Me personally, my eyes and face are way too sensitive to consume any content like this for a long period of time. But if you can do it, then, I hate you. But if you can do it, then you should try it. It's really nice. You know, it's kind of like headphones for your eyes, now that I'm thinking about it. The browser is also featured enough to let you download some APKs directly from it and then install them, which is nice. Between the Homebrew and the emulators and PC Link, the Quest 2 is pretty cool. I like it. The whole process of modding it is also really fun. If you like soft modding consoles like the Wii or the 3DS or the PSP, there isn't like as much hackery, I guess, involved in this. You make like a Facebook developer account and stuff. It's kind of weird, but the process, I guess, is kind of similar. I hope you enjoy. Nope, no outro yet. Hold on, we're not done. That's it for the Quest 2, but hold on, do not click off this video yet. Hold on, there was a giveaway that I ran in my last video, and we're picking the winner right now. And the winner of the $7.99 Lenovo is Jack Neely 7772 over on YouTube. All right, Jack, here's how you claim your prize. I've got a link to my Discord server down in the description. You need to go ahead and join the Discord, find me on there, and then go ahead and send me a DM, and we can hash out all the details so I can get that thing to you. And for everyone else, if something comes up and it doesn't work out and we have to pick someone else, go ahead and make sure you look at my community posts page on my channel. Once I've either confirmed with Jack that he's going to be able to receive it, or I have to go and pick someone else, I'm going to make a community post about it so you guys can get some closure, I guess. But yeah, congratulations, Jack Neely. The $7.99 Lenovo is yours. You just gotta message me to get it. And anyone else that's interested, that Discord is open for anyone to join. That's my official Bringus Studios Discord. So you're welcome to talk with other people that like modding, hacking, stuff like that. You're welcome to post your memes, post pictures of your cat. We got something for everybody. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for coming along on the ride. I will see you in the next one. The Nintendo DS is the first console that I ever bought new. Me and my sisters all pitched in and we bought a brand spanking new crimson and black DS Lite. And then 3 months later, the DSi came out. But even in the shadow of its cooler younger brother, the DS and the DS Lite were still incredible systems that offered the most unique gaming experience around. And unique is the choice word here because, but despite its technical limitations, it does deserve to be looked at again in 2022 because believe it or not, the DS is literally only 2 months away from being a legal adult. This thing is about to push 2 decades old, and there's a lot of people out there who missed out on everything and didn't get to make any memories with it. But even the people that did grow up with this thing still might have missed out on one particular part of the DS's history. The homebrew scene. Alright, so you decided you want to run some DS homebrew. How are you going to do it? Usually you're going to do it from this slot right here, the DS game card slot. Technically there's ways to do it with the GBA slot, but no, just don't do it. The easiest way to do it is to pick up one of these, a DS flashcard. It's kind of just like a DS game that has a micro SD card slot on it. And back in the DS homebrew scene's heyday, oh man, there was no shortage of these things. They were so common that you'd have a hard time keeping them out of your house. Mom, they're getting in again. Let's see, we had the R4, the Ace card, the DSTT, the M3, those were some of the big hitters, and I guess to some extent, Daytel's Action Replay kinda counts. They all had their own strengths and weaknesses, some of them had spin-offs and variations, but it was usually just to introduce DSi and 3DS support later on. And of course, my personal favorite flashcard is the R4 3DS Upgrade Snoopy Revolution for 3DS, 2DS, NDSi, new 3DS, 2DS, LL, XL, dual-core wood kernel update. The one that I've got right here is the Gateway Blue card. Long story short, it's not really intended to be a DS flashcard. It was for a homebrew thing on the 3DS, but essentially it's just an R4 flashcard. Also, a funny little footnote with these things is that each one of them shows up as a random game to try and trick the system into letting it run. Alright, you have your flashcard, but now what do you do with it? Well, you could break that question down into 4 different categories. You can play community-made games, run homebrew apps, emulate other consoles, and commit multiple federal crimes. We'll start out by looking at a homebrew app called Nitro Tracker. It's actually really sick. It's a pretty well-featured music production program for chiptune style music. I even got it to sample my very own bruh. But I will be honest, I don't really know anything about making music in general. This is all way over my head. I just know it's impressive software for being on a DS. Anyway, one smooth transition later, we'll check out some homebrew games made by community members. A really impressive one is DS Craft, a Minecraft clone that Microsoft does not want you to know about. It's really bare bones, and it resembles Minecraft Alpha more than anything that's out today. It does have an okay selection of blocks to pick from, and it mostly just suffers from the DS's lack of good controls for any 3D games at all. However, it does get an A+ from me, since despite these limitations, I was able to make a minimalist rendition of Old Spice deodorant. It's definitely more of a cool showcase of what programmers can do with the DS homebrew stuff than an actual game. But even then, it is still crazy that they managed to get a game like this, even in its current state, on the DS, with just community-made tools. And how could I possibly talk about homebrew without the homebrew community's version of Frank's Red Hot?
I put that on everything.
Doom is here, because of course it is, and it plays really well. Once again, it does suffer from the DS's controls, but not as much since Doom is less reliant on needing to look up and down than Minecraft is. It's a fitting addition to the DS's homebrew scene, and a pretty good way to play Doom on the go, to be honest. This one is actually pretty notorious. Still Alive DS is a port of Portal the Flash version, which itself is a 2D side-scrolling puzzle game that's inspired by Portal's mechanics. It's actually a really great game, and it complements the original Portal really nicely. It's a lot of fun. I played the pants off this game when I was a kid, and I was really excited to go and download it again. But sometime between then and now, someone made another Portal-inspired game for the DS called Portal DS, which I thought was Still Alive DS, but no, it's a f***ing fully 3D Portal game on the DS. Yeah, needless to say, I am blown away by this. I've never seen this before until just now. Like, this was not an actual team of people professionally making games that made this. This was just DS homebrew community members. The stuff that they were able to do near the end of the DS's lifespan with homebrew was crazy. Anyway, about the actual game itself, I would have loved to play more of it, but it was just really difficult to get the DS to do what I was trying to get it to do, once again because of the limited controls. Overall though, you can absolutely color me impressed with this one. Alright, what goes better together than homebrew and emulation? The DS has no shortage of emulation options. You're pretty well covered when it comes to any system from the Sega Genesis and older. And I say Sega Genesis specifically and not Super Nintendo because the DS has some, issues with it. Sick. But I had a great time playing Sega Genesis games, Game Boy games, and NES games. You know what really surprised me though is that GBA emulation is now really trivial. People used to spend a lot of money on a flash card called the SuperCard DS2 because it had its own SoC on the cartridge, specifically there to emulate GBA games. And if you didn't have this specific flash card, you were kinda out of luck. Man, imagine invalidating thousands of people's purchasing decision with a 260 kilobyte file. But yeah, coming back to the present, GBA runs great on any flash cart now. I didn't experience any slowdowns or glitches, other than maybe like 1 second of stuttering on a loading screen. There's also a handful of retro PC emulators out there for the DS, but I don't really have the funds to hire an archaeologist for this video, so I won't be checking any of those out. Overall though, the DS is a really good emulation device for older titles, and the control scheme is just perfect for it. Now though, we get into the legal gray area part of flash carts. You probably already assumed that these things can boot up and play regular retail DS ROMs of actual cartridges, and you'd be right. They play them flawlessly. Well, I guess you might lose out on a couple more advanced features on some cartridges, like on Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, they had an IR sensor inside of the cartridge to communicate with something called the Pokewalker. It was a pedometer Nintendo released to compete with the Tamagotchi craze of the 2000s. But forgettable accessories aside, you couldn't even tell that you were risking jail time to play Super Mario 64 DS. You know what else is cool is you can actually still use DS download play on most games. It's a great way to make your friends unwitting accomplices. And remember kids, make sure you own the cartridges for any ROMs that you play, otherwise someone might project their guilt about it to you on the internet, and we don't want that. I of course ripped all of my ROMs from the cartridges that you see here in my hand that I physically own, and are made of atoms and not pixels. Another great use for flash carts are playing ROM hacks. ROM hacks are the natural fusion of homebrew and retail games. There's quite a bit to choose from on the DS. Some of the more popular ones are ROM hacks for games like the Pokemon series that add back Pokemon that were only catchable in the other version of the game, or they increase the difficulty, change up the sprites, etc. There's a lot of fan translations out there too for games that only came out in other regions like Japan. That's something that happened a lot on the DS. You know, I really owe it to the DS Homebrew community for finally letting me play, let me see here, Puzzle Series Volume 12 in English. To wrap everything up, if you're interested in Homebrew and you have an old DS lying around, or you just want to play DS games on the original hardware, because let's face it, this ain't it. Trust me, a flashcard is the way to go. You can pick them up on Amazon for the price of like 2 gallons of gas, which is only, oh Jesus, like $15 apparently. Oh my God. But at least it is all you need. You don't need to mod your DS or install a mod chip or anything like that. They just work. Things do get a little hairy when you try and use them with a DSi or a 3DS, but nowadays most cards already have the support for them built in. And do keep in mind that some of the cheaper flash cards have something called a time bomb built into them, which is really, really dumb. It just makes it so they stop working after a while. But they don't actually stop working, because you can just set the date back on the calendar in the DS settings, and then they work again. Yeah, it's really weird, so try and buy one that doesn't have that. Alright, that's about it though, and another thanks goes out to all my Patreon supporters. You guys are the real deal, I really appreciate it. And let me know in the comments which console you want me to look at with Homebrew next, and then subscribe to make sure that you actually get to see that video. Oh, and leave a comment about any standout DS Homebrew stuff that I didn't touch on in this video, because there is a lot out there, and I just wanted to look at a select few. Anyways, that's it for this one. I will see you in the next video. So you've just finished watching some tool on YouTube tell you how good the Nintendo DS is for homebrew and hacking. Neat, you thought. But why not just use a 3DS? And you're right, the 3DS is great. But what made the 3DS so great anyway? Well, it sure wasn't this. The 3DS took the best things about the DS and the PSP and put them together into one package. Well, I say one package, but really there's a unique 3DS for just about anyone. If you need something more compact, the original 3DS has a similar footprint to the DS Lite and the DSi middle child that came before it. If you want a smaller console but you need more power, there's the new 3DS, which pioneered putting pencil erasers on Nintendo consoles, as well as throwing naming conventions out the window. The original 3DS also had a bigger brother with the same specs but a bigger footprint, available as the 3DS XL. And throughout this video, I'm going to be using my new 3DS XL, which combines the biggest and most powerful versions of the 3DS into one. I'd say it's tied for being the best version of the 3DS alongside the new 2DS XL, with whom it shares its size and specs with, you know, as long as you don't care about having a 3D screen. Additionally available in doorstop form factor, or DFF for short. So let's take a head count here real quick. In order of release date for the USA, we have the original 3DS from 2011, the 3DS XL from 2012, the 2DS in 2013, the new 3DS and the XL variant of that through 2015, and the new 2DS XL in 2017. That is a lot of 3DSs. Personally, my first device in the 3DS family was a 2DS that I bought off of eBay. It had a cracked screen, but I just replaced it myself to save a few bucks compared to buying a fully working one. Fun fact actually, the screens on the 2DS are actually just one physical LCD since the unit doesn't need to fold. But then that brings us to today with my gray new 3DS XL right here, which you guys would have actually seen before, which I had fixed in a video from early 2022 that you can watch right here. And an honorable mention goes out to my girlfriend's new 2DS XL right here. Now that you've met the family, I do still need to answer the question I asked earlier. What made the 3DS so great? The 3DS took what the DSi had started, but it fully fleshed it out. There was a proper home screen, a proper online storefront for digital downloads, cool social features, backwards compatibility with the DS, some cameras for messing around, and finally, an analog stick. I always think about the 3DS as the competitor to the PSP that Nintendo wished they had back in 2005. Except, you know, they kind of still obliterated the PSP in sales either way, so maybe not? Okay, it was what everybody but Nintendo wishes the DS was back in 2005. 3D games play far better on here due to the greater specs than the DS. It feels like most 3DS games were kind of closer on par visually to what you might find on the GameCube. The original DS kind of felt like N64-ish. First-party and third-party games alike were popping off at this time, and Nintendo released hits for most of their major IPs, and they're pretty much all still great to go back and play even today. Especially with the 3DS and the DS being the form factor they are, you kind of have to hold on to the original hardware to play a lot of these games the right way. Of course, you can emulate the DS and the 3DS, but it's just not the same. Anyway, those are some of the reasons that the 3DS was such a hit with the average gamer back then. But you all know very well at this point that that's not me, I'm not the average gamer. I'm installing Windows on a Mac Mini because I couldn't use Linux properly on my PS4. Also, I can play RetroArch on a Leapfrog. So what makes the 3DS so great to me? Okay, let's get this one out of the way. Of course, a modded 3DS can play 3DS games for free. Despite if that may cause you some moral turmoil, it's still the best way to experience all the different 3DS specific titles that the 3DS has to offer, given you have a fairly stout SD card to hold everything. One of the more interesting reasons that you're going to want to mod your 3DS, though, is emulation. After all, Nintendo themselves pushed emulation on this thing right off the bat with the Ambassador program. Early adopters who paid the launch price for the 3DS back in 2011 were referred to by Nintendo as 3DS ambassadors, which I suppose is a better name than sucker. These people got to pick out some NES and GBA titles to download for free onto their 3DS, and it was Nintendo's way to say sorry for pump and dumping the price of the 3DS from $250 at launch to $170 shortly after. While all of the NES titles were emulated, I guess the GBA titles weren't. See, the 3DS has a GBA port right here, just... Wait, no it doesn't. Okay, but if it's not emulation, then it's running natively, right? Well, actually it is, despite not having a cartridge port. Let me introduce you to the magic of keeping the same CPU architecture for a long-ass time. Lucky for Nintendo, the GBA shares a very similar CPU architecture to that of the DS and the 3DS. So, with a little behind-the-scenes f***ery, the GBA Ambassador games ran natively on the 3DS, which is pretty cool. Let's get back on track though. Emulation on the 3DS, specifically custom firmware-enabled emulation. We'll kick things off with the Sega Genesis. Just like the DS before it, the 3DS runs Sega Genesis just fine. It's a complete breeze for this thing. Everything is running great. Get it? Because Knuckles is running here. He's running. Knuckles is loading up some Super Nintendo games, though, things take a bit of a weird turn. So you can see here that most of these emulators are running in RetroArch. That should actually look pretty familiar to you if you've seen my previous video where I installed RetroArch on a Leapfrog. If you haven't seen that video yet though, actually go watch that. That Leapfrog can do some amazing stuff. Anyway, booting up SNES games using the RetroArch core version of SNES 9X results in pretty crappy results, to be honest. It felt like I was only running the games at half speed on both Super Mario World and F-Zero here, and initially I was really disappointed in this showing. But I did a little bit of research, and I guess the standalone application CIA version of SNES 9X runs much better. And a CIA on the 3DS, if you don't already know, it's like a standalone app or game that you can install directly to your home screen, instead of running in RetroArch. So I installed that, and not only do the games run better, but they also look a lot more crisp by default. I can confidently say here that SNES emulation on the 3DS is pretty good. Next up is Game Boy Advance. Just like I talked about earlier, GBA on the 3DS is really interesting because it can run the games natively. However, it gets a little less interesting when I tell you that it doesn't really matter. Maybe it's because I get to benefit from the higher performance on the new 3DS, but the whole time I was testing Game Boy Advance games, I used GPSP, which is a traditional emulator. And you know what?
I'm about to say it. Say it. I don't care that you
can run GBA games natively.
Because the games that I wanted to play worked fine, looked fine, played fine, and didn't leave me wanting anything more. That being said, I didn't test every single game in the GBA library, so your mileage may vary. But goddammit, if you need to run more than Danny Phantom Attack of the Killer Garage Sale on Nicktoons Collection Volume 3, to be honest, I don't know if this relationship is going to work out. I went into this intending to try out OpenAGB Firm, which is how you would run GBA ROMs natively on the 3DS, but I just don't see a reason to. I'm more than satisfied with how the GPSP RetroArch core works. But you know what I'm really not satisfied with? PS1 emulation. Cause look at this shit. This is rough. Man, you know it's bad when the Leapfrog did it better. The 3DS, it's just not cut out for PS1 emulation, full stop. Sure, you can probably get away with 2D titles like Rayman and Mega Man, but come on, when did the PSP come out? Oh, you know, just like 6 years prior to the 3DS? Granted, PS1 games on the PSP are largely perfect, because you know everything is made by Sony and the processors are both fairly similar MIPS chips. And I'm not trying to discredit those who did the work to port PCSX Rearmed to the 3DS. I mean, it can't be an easy task to get the performance even to the level that it's at here, even if it's not great. My point is, if you want to play PS1 games, games just don't look to the 3DS for a good solution. I was really hopeful that the 3DS would be able to emulate Virtual Boy games, since, 3D screen and all that. Other than a VR headset, it seems like this would be the best way to experience Virtual Boy games. Unfortunately though, it's all a big letdown, because I couldn't even get my games to start, let alone play. And based on videos of other people who did get it to run, it does not look like I'm missing out on much, so I'll be sticking to the original hardware for that. One console that you cannot emulate on the 3DS period is the original DS, but you wouldn't want to anyway because, once again, those games can run natively on the 3DS. For a long time in the 3DS and DSi hacking scene, the general consensus was that running DS ROMs from the SD card slot just wasn't possible for one reason or another. But it also really wasn't that big of a deal for most people because DS flashcards up to that point had all been updated to work on the latest firmware on the 3DS, and they were cheap enough anyway to just buy one of those and play all the DS games you want on that, rather than wait and hope that someone would just miraculously figure out how to run DS games from the SD card. And then they did exactly that. Thanks to the work of these incredible folks, we could now play DS games off the SD card, no flash cart required. Compatibility had initially started off a bit rough, but it's actually gotten a lot better over the years. It can play most commercial games fine, and it's more than good enough for me. It even runs on the DSi. How about Homebrew that isn't emulation? The 3DS actually takes some inspiration from the Wii in that there's a proper place for all your Homebrew right on the home screen in this channel right here, the Homebrew launcher. Here you can run any Homebrew that you find on the internet, such as ThirdTube, a YouTube client. It actually runs really well here on the 3DS. Videos look as good as they possibly could on a screen this size, and it retains a lot of features that the desktop version has. You can still search, browse comments, and find new videos to watch. There is an official YouTube client for the 3DS as well, but it was discontinued back in 2019, so this is the best we're gonna get nowadays. Another great application is Anemone, a theme manager. The ominous 3DS background music never quite suited my tastes, so I used this to get rid of it, as well as install this cool galaxy background. It's a hell of a lot nicer to look at than one of the solid colors that you get by default. But damn it, this is a game console. We're not here to watch YouTube and decorate wallpapers. We're here to open a portal to an alien world and destroy society as we know it. And what do you know? Half-Life was ported to the 3DS just so we could scratch that itch. Technically, this isn't just Half-Life. It's the entire open source Zash 3D engine, which is a loader for Valve Gold Source-based games. The dual analog sticks of the 3DS allow for far better first-person shooter gameplay here than you could ever get on the DS or the PSP. 60 FPS maintained basically the entire time. Every once in a while though, it seems like a new sound or a new scripted event would trigger and it would cause some stutters, but as the game went on, it actually happened less and less. The biggest issues here by far are the load times. I mean, at least it's authentic to the experience of how it would have looked and felt back in 1998, I guess. While we're on the topic of first-person shooters though, look, it's everyone's favorite comment! It can run Doom! It can do it! So now I'm sure no one will ask if it can run Doom in the comments, right? Right? Space Cadet Pinball, everyone under the age of 60's favorite pack-in Windows game. And for everyone else, I'm sure someone ported Solitaire. But for some reason, Space Cadet Pinball is here on the 3DS. Why? Why is this here? Why do we do this? Why do we want this? Not just Space Cadet Pinball. Why do we want any of this? Why do I want to play SNES games and GBA games on my 3DS? Why do I want to play DS games from an SD card when there's a perfectly good way to do it right here? Why do I have to modify and mess with everything I get my hands on? And why won't I enjoy using it otherwise? Is it because I'm just a cheap bastard who refuses to play games the legit way if there's an option to save me a buck? Or is it something more? Because, for example, if I truly wanted to play Rhythm Heaven that bad on my 3DS, and there wasn't a cheaper homebrew-based way to load it, I would just give in and buy the game secondhand and play it that way. And in that example, I'm hacking my 3DS because I want to play Rhythm Heaven on the cheap, but I'd still buy it if I didn't have that option because I want to play Rhythm Heaven that bad. But that's not how it is in reality. It's just not. That's not what I would actually do. So it has to be something else then. I have to be hacking for a different reason. Am I just not okay with being told no? And this is the way I rebel? Am I doing this just to spit in Nintendo's face for no real reason other than just because I can? Or am I doing this because I'm in love with the process and modding and the whole journey of it? And the end result doesn't really matter to me. After I install custom firmware or a soft mod or a jailbreak or whatever, and I load up all my games and install my favorite homebrew, do I even intend to do anything with it after that? Or play any of those games I installed? I mean, there's a reason you guys always see me playing through the tutorial or the first level of every single game on here. Is hacking a game console and installing all the games I always wanted as a kid and then never playing them my way of how other people will go and collect all their favorite childhood toys as an adult, put them on a shelf, and then never touch them ever again? No matter how many consoles I mod, or how many times I play the first level of Super Mario World and then quit right after, will it ever be enough? Why can't I just be content with the hundreds of games I already have? Why aren't they enough? Why is it more fun for me to install the same games over and over again, but then never even play them? Why do I enjoy seeing this screen more than this screen? When did it become less about playing the games and more about obtaining them in the most convoluted ways? Should I even call myself a gamer at this point, or am I nothing more than a penny-pinching data hoarder with a nostalgia addiction? And does it matter? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.